Welcome to the podcast that's dedicated to making you a faster cyclist, the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast presented by Trainer Road. I'm Coach Jonathan Lee with our head coach, Chad Timmerman.
Hi, everybody.
Our CEO, Nate Pearson.
Hello.
And this is where we answer the questions that you submit, the cycling and triathlon related ones, or I guess unrelated too, at trainerroad.com/podcast. And we'll just get straight into this. Actually, the first thing I do want to say is that you can join us on YouTube, and there are people doing that now live, and it's usually every Thursday at 8 a.m. Pacific. And you can ask your questions, and then we take some time, of course, and answer those at the end. And it's fun to, I don't know, maybe it's fun to see us, maybe it's not fun to see us, but just the same. Matt submitted a question.
Depends on the hair day.
Yeah, that's true. And this is really getting at the most important things in life. So Matt says, love the podcast and app, 5 out of 5. Thank you. Appreciate that. Thanks, man. My question is a tad silly, but theoretically, if my only goal from training was to get giant, and he says that in all caps, giant quads, what would optimal training look like?
It's not silly.
Yeah, everybody wants that.
He says, I've tried strength training in the past, reaching a squat of 305 and a deadlift of 415 at 160 pounds. That's his body weight.
That's a lot.
But never saw gains in leg size. Since growing my FTP from 170 to 215 at 155 pounds with Trainer Road, I've actually started to see some growth in leg size. So how could one push this further?
Chad, I think there's two answers. One is cycling and one is strength training. Mm-hmm. You want to go both routes?
Sure.
Which route you want to start?
Well, with cycling, you're seeing it right now. You're probably getting some slow twitch fiber hypertrophy, so type 1 hypertrophy, because that's vastly what you're relying on. Even when we recruit the intermediate fibers, which are a little more glycolytic, a little more carbohydrate burning, there's still only so much potential for growth there, and they're not utilized as often. So really, you're getting the gains you're going to get. I mean, if you look at World Tour riders who do a ton of miles, so many of them never hit the gym, but they have pretty big inflated legs. That's because their slow twitch fibers are relatively huge and capable of doing a whole lot of work, and actually, they get big. So they actually have really usefully big legs, and big is a relative term, of course.
Yeah. And track riders, they're actually in the weight room a lot, though.
Oh, yeah.
Getting huge legs.
Yeah, so World Tour versus track, very different approach to
different
strength.
look.
And I know there's a lot of other variables here, but look at a guy like Chris Froome, for example, who puts out a massive amount of power, but his legs do not look in any way like big legs.
Yeah, you don't need big...
In quotes here,
Because you're never exerting that much force on the pedals. Even when you're standing and drilling it up a pretty steep climb, the force output is still nothing akin to what you do in the gym.
Yeah, cycling is an aerobic sport, and that's why Chris Froome, with a huge aerobic engine, can push so hard. But who doesn't want big legs?
Yeah, right?
As a person who doesn't have big legs, I want big legs.
Yours are just arrow, Nate, not big. Yeah, they're
so
arrow.
when you're low cadence drills, low cadence, like high force, is that, do we have science in that? It seems
really.
like anecdotally it will help.
It might touch on the mid twitch fibers and maybe hypertrophy them a bit. But it's not enough force output to touch the slow twitch or the fast twitch fibers, which are your big gainers. So even low cadence, slow or high force work, while it might add a bit of mass, it's still not. I mean, if you want giant quads, that's not the way you're going to get them.
The interesting thing about this to me is the fact that he, spent obviously some time in the gym doing some heavy lifting.
Yeah, really strong. And there's another differentiation to draw or to distinguish between there in that you can get really strong and not have a lot of size.
Yeah.
Really strong. And that's largely neuromuscular. That's just how much fiber of the existing fiber can be recruited. And he's a perfect example of it. 160 pounds, this guy can deadlift 415. Is that his deadlift? Yeah, and squat 305. So he's squatting nearly twice his weight.
Strong
at not a
person.
He's a cyclist size. He's not big.
Yeah,
so
it's a strong person.
It's a testament to how strong you can get without adding a bunch of mass.
So in that, classically 5 and below would be training strength and neuromuscular pathways, and which is. It's crazy, is your body just gets better at using the muscle
it does.
that you already have.
You put 250 on the bar, and then next week or next workout, you put 255, 260, 265, 270. You just keep escalating, and your body follows in suit. It's amazing.
Now, some people that have, is there a direct tie, Chad, to... For some reason, you see some cyclists, they just have massive legs.
Yeah, there's always a genetic component. So the muscle fiber composition, whether you're 50-50 blend between the fiber types or more of a 40-60 blend, I mean, there's those factors always enter into it.
And that also inputs into your cycling performance long term, or what kind of cyclist you're going to be, if you're a good sprinter or
if you really flesh that out and you start to see where my strengths actually lie.
Yeah, and you might be naturally good at one thing because of your fiber composition, or just the way you've grown up and you're training in high school and all that sort of stuff. So if you do want to get big legs, it's going to be going to the gym, doing a bunch of leg exercises, 8 to 10 rep range classically.
It's really arguable that you can go crazy with the rep range. I mean, you have to be upwards of 12 to 15 is like the sweet spot for hypertrophy. But what's really important, I mean, you can go 20, 25, 30 reps as long as you're achieving exhaustion. Those last couple of reps have to be everything you've got left. Form be damned. I mean, a lot of times they say go until you can't maintain good form anymore. If you want big muscles, go until the form starts to break down. It's not dangerously breaking down, but you start to lose it because you're completely physically, muscularly exhausted.
And there have been studies recently where they do 2 groups with one from 8 to 10 and one, I think, the 35 rep range going to exhaustion. Same size
Level
increase.
of increase.
Yeah, I remember that.
Cross-sectional area.
I always say it wrong. I want to say hypertrophy. So you ever read it?
Hypertrophy, yeah.
I know, and I heard people call it hypertrophy,
It doesn't matter.
hypertrophy.
It doesn't matter. It's like any word. You can say it 5 different ways. It means the same thing.
Yeah, so when you hear that just means growing bigger muscles.
Yeah, bigger
or more-
cross-sectional area.
Yeah, cross-sectional area of the muscle. And that could be the fibers getting bigger, more water in them, or you get new fibers.
New fibers is hyperplasia. So that's when we start to veer into different territory, but it's still an increase in force capability, increase in
what you-
strength.
Which is really what you're getting
Yeah,
toward.
so if I understand it right, it's when the fiber gets to a point that it simply can't get larger, that's when you start to split.
Yeah, same with fat cells.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is
Same idea.
probably end on this question on this bummer. When you get an extra fat cell, that never goes away. When you get extra fat
Sucks.
cells, you can make them smaller, but they don't go away unless you do liposuction.
Oh, it's the worst, man.
The worst.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a bummer.
All right, so let's get into the next one. And this is basically more of a summation, not a specific question, but we're getting more and more questions.
I'm going to pause you right there. We're going to snip that out, and it's going to say on YouTube, how to get big legs. It's going to be a million.
There we
a
go.
million. We're done, guys.
Share it with your friends.
Yep,
Checked
how
off.
to get big legs. Sorry, John, for interrupting
That's
you.
fine.
But I was
That's
in the
good.
middle of it. I wanted to
That's
say it, but I'm like, I'm going to ruin it if I say it.
Yeah, that's good.
It's going to be fun.
I don't think we mentioned too a lot of sets. You can't just do one.
Oh, yeah.
That's a good point.
One set to exhaustion and call it a day. You basically have to push your work capacity again and again and again. Once you get good at one thing, you have to further challenge yourself, just like anything else. Anything else, we progress.
This is another interesting thing is about volume. People say, well, should I do all the volume on like 2 days or should I spread it out? And they've also done studies on this, and it's just volume
Pretty
per week.
even, yeah.
Yeah, you could do it either way. If
Yeah.
you could do it all in one day and do 5 sets, or actually probably 10 sets that hit, let's say, your legs, or you could spread it out over the week.
The important thing is that the work's getting done.
Yep, that you have volume.
Yeah,
Yep,
Just
that's it.
has to be a sufficient stimulus. A stimulus that outweighs or outdoes what you've done before.
And you're not getting injured. Legs, it's a little easier to get injured.
Totally.
With the kind of
Anything
loads
that
that
loads the
you're doing.
spine is dangerous.
Yep.
Potentially.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of people, just because of the time of the year, have already been sending in questions on how to transition to cyclocross season.
Oh, and from your fitness, the road season,
Yeah,
not doing anything more.
Yeah, I'm not winning anymore. Got to get in, move on to something
time to
else,
transition.
right? So yes, cross is coming, and just some basic principles on transitioning over to cross season. So the first thing I want to say before we get too far is that the common assumption is that cyclocross is extremely hard punches over and over, and some courses will necessitate that to a certain degree. However, what we've seen from looking at power files from top riders,
Yeah, they're not extremely hard.
yeah, they smooth that out more. They keep the pace high everywhere, and then on those climbs, they aren't like the difference between climbing and then everywhere else on the course compared to us amateurs. It's actually much less.
I think what amateurs do is we punch ourselves in the face
Yes.
until it hurts so much, and then we slow down. And especially because, so on the road, you can be less fitness and ride with people way higher fitness because of drafting. But in cyclocross, there could be someone with, 30 watts more FTP, and you can hang with them for a lap or two.
Yep.
But then you're going to be destroyed.
Yes.
Because that person is being more smooth, or even if they're riding just like you, you're going to get dropped. So it's a strange mix of wanting to, if you win, to be with the leaders, but also pace yourself to do the whole course faster.
Yes.
Yeah, you go too deep too soon, and there's really no way to come back from it. I mean,
Yep.
at some point, you're going to have to recover. That gap's going to grow, and you're probably not going to make it up again.
I did that in a race with us just last Tuesday, and
Right.
it took me about 30 minutes to be able to like breathe normally and like
Go
feel
hard
good.
again.
Which
again.
can work, like if you can hide in the midst of a criterium or a rolling field.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But on a cyclocross course, there's not really
No
any
hiding.
hiding.
Yeah.
And
In
along-
fact, there's no hiding.
Along those lines, something that cyclocross racers should consider is the fact that, and we've talked about this with gravel or rough roads or anything else before, but if you're racing in grass or anything like that, or you're racing in like a loose surface, that basically raises the tide of the power output needed for everybody. to a certain degree, right? Like,
Sure.
So, and let's just say I have a 120 watt threshold and I'm riding with another person that has a 340 watt threshold. And just, we're throwing out numbers here, and riding through that grass takes 20 watts out of us, out of both of us, right? That's a greater portion of my threshold compared to that bigger rider.
That's a huge, that's a big, like,
a good point.
people need to understand that.
Yep. So, and the other side of that is that basically means that you're going to have to stay on the gas at like a greater percentage of your threshold throughout that whole race if you're racing in the grass. So that means that you really have to make sure that you can't really decide where you want to quote unquote rest. You can basically only decide how hard you want to go on those climbs. And so that's kind of what you need to control for. So that's the reason I'm mentioning that is I think a lot of people instantly think, cyclocross, I need to just work on absolutely as hard as I can and repeat that. And repeatability is super important for cyclocross.
Yeah, and those high intensity, really high power efforts are important too. It's a good thing to cultivate those, to have that arrow in your quiver, but don't focus on that.
Yep.
That's a sprinkling.
Yeah, so for a lot of people that have fitness right now, they've been racing or riding, right, coming through this season, and you're going to do cyclocross. The other point that we need to make is that the season's long. Cyclocross season is not short.
Yep.
It's going to be starting in August for some people, and it's going to go all the way to January, February, something like that for some. For us locally, it starts in September, and then it wraps up in December usually. So that's a long season of racing. And as a result, you don't want to just jump straight into for example, right now, you don't want to start the specialty plan right now. And then, you'll get to a point where you'll just have to maintain. It might be a better idea to build.
Depends. Some people, I think, at the very beginning of the cross season, they're like you can be really good at the beginning or the end.
Yeah.
And you kind of surprise people.
The point is pick a spot, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's
You're not going to be
race,
strong for 5, 6, 7 months in a row. That's
exactly.
for dang sure.
Yeah.
That's your point, right?
Exactly right. So pick a race, pick a series of races, pick a time frame, like a month, something like that. Yeah. And that's what you'll really build to.
Maybe carry good fitness into the early season when some riders are tired and still forcing themselves to race so that you can get some early results, maybe get some good seedings. Then take a break and then rally or reboot, so to speak, for the later part of the season.
That's actually a really common approach for people that are targeting national championships, because in the early part of the season, if you're ahead of the curve, like you said, you can get some good points, and that'll help for call-ups. Then you can kind of rest for a bit and then come back in and really build back up. Yeah. But really, the point is, if you're sitting right here and you have fitness and you're looking to race cross and you have some time, and you aren't going to target something in the beginning, roll through a build phase that's going to complement your current fitness, and we'll go into that in a bit, and then hit the specialty so that times out roughly. It ends.
You can even add a short endurance block, like a 2-week endurance block, just to get away from intensity for a couple weeks, but build your aerobic capacity from the low side.
I think that too. It's almost like a mental reset as much as a physical reset.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you just get you get desire to train. You're like, I don't like these long, slow intervals anymore.
You get refreshed. Yeah.
Yes, and the on the balancing out your strengths or weaknesses sort of a thing. Like for example, you may be an athlete that's really good at like repeated efforts that are really hard, but you're not great at sustainable stuff. So that doesn't necessarily mean that just because you're racing cyclocross, once again, that you need to do short power build and go into the cyclocross plan. Doing something like general build and then going into the cyclocross plan could be good for you, since you're kind of building up against a weakness that you have and making it less limiting on race day.
The other thing, and I've never done this, and I'm the person who needs to do this the most. Cody Kaiser said this. Beginning of the season, he always starts to mount and dismount at a walking speed.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Cody is better, like most likely, than everyone listening at cyclocross skills.
Skills.
Yeah.
Oh, he's through the roof.
It's ridiculous.
And he still walks on his bike and dismounts at a walking pace. I don't. Sometimes it's like the first race, or like you're warming up and you see the first obstacle and you do it. Like that's okay. I'm good.
Yeah.
So that's just something that I think cyclocross. Probably just as much as mountain biking, it's skills, or could be more, because your skills get
more
involved.
Concentrated,
Yeah, your skills like almost all the time.
Yes.
Where mountain biking, you have a long climb and you don't really need skills.
And there's skills that don't wear well over the course of the course of the race. As you get more tired, oh man, it's so easy to make a mistake on, for instance, a mount dismount.
Dismounts get ugly.
Mount. Yeah, with your cleats.
It's so ugly.
I've never tried to bunny hop anything because I'm totally afraid of.
Oh yeah,
my feet get so heavy too, and they just start clomping down on those brief little runs. The fatigue is very obvious.
Yes.
Are you going to race cross this year?
Maybe. We'll see.
Okay,
We'll see
that's
what
a
sort
no.
of fitness comes out of Kona.
Are you going to race cross this year?
Yeah. I want to do some, not a whole season, not with any specific goal, but I absolutely want to do some
And
races.
it's not a no. I might.
They're,
I might.
For me, they're really fun. Like they're hard, they're painful, everything else like that, but they're really short usually. And it's just a fun way to like, I may be, perhaps mentally fragile in this regard, but like after the season, and then, my season usually ends in around August, end of July, something like that for mountain biking. And then when I get into cyclocross in the fall, it's nice because it removes guilt on Saturdays a lot of the time. I can do my cross race in the morning, and then I can just go home and do something absolutely other than bike riding and be totally okay with it, because at that point I'm not looking to put in big days and training, that sort of a thing. So it's a fun way to kind of check that box for me, and yeah, it's a blast. And the other thing I would say is strength training. We've talked about this a lot recently. We're going to be talking about it more. In fact, a quick announcement on that coming soon. We'll have more information on this and the exact date nailed down for you, but we're actually going to have a special guest on the podcast who is an absolute authority in the mobility and strength world. And it's going to be a live podcast recording in San Francisco. So pretty exciting stuff. We'll give you all the details really soon, but stay
Mobility
tuned.
kind of gives it away.
Yeah, hey,
Tease.
yeah, tease. Oh, yeah.
To those
If
in
they
So
know-
many people in the world.
If they
It
know
could
him,
be.
if they know him, then yes, yeah.
Could be a
Oh, now
trillion.
we know it's a guy.
Yep. Just
Why
dropping
don't we
hints.
just say it?
Nope. Not yet. So anyways, but it's this cyclocross especially, I feel like being a strong body is absolutely key. And and you'll notice that with like Chad, when you laid out the benchmarks that you said that were basically like
For the level 3 guys.
yep,
Yeah.
cyclocross is in there, and I think that it's an important thing because when we talk about your form breaking down with fatigue, and cyclocross does that, having a strong body really helps with maintaining that sort of form when you're going through that
durable
that stuff.
body, yeah.
Yep. Yeah, because cross hurts too. Like you fall pretty regularly, relatively speaking, compared to road racing. And even though you fall on grass, that sort of a stuff, having a strong body is huge. So that's why I got like
Agreed.
Steve-Bar, for example, looks like a
The cross riders always pack a little extra muscle. Seems like they do. I mean, you look at
yeah.
MBDP and Van Aert.
yep.
Yeah,
They're
they're big guys.
They're not frail. That's for darn sure. So if you have questions on cyclocross, specifically that sort of stuff, let them fly. Just go to trainerroad.com/podcast and let us know. We'll be talking more and more about cross as we go into that season. But hopefully that gives you some guidelines. Once again, it's just all about trying to time your peak with the specialty phase. Don't be afraid to pick a time in the cross season to peak for
Be a bit
instead of
selective.
trying to be fast the whole time. And look at, this. Remember that cross isn't just punchy, so maybe you should shore some of that up with a general build or like an endurance block or some sustained work as well. So with that, can we go to Noah's question?
Mm-hmm.
So Noah says, long-time listener, first-time caller. My question is about tailoring your tailoring your taper for specific types of events. I primarily race mountain bikes, mountain bike endurance and enduro disciplines. The former very heavily in the spring, the latter throughout the summer. So enduro through the summer, XC or endurance XC events through the spring. I'm curious how one should taper for an enduro or downhill race. Generally, I taper by reducing volume, but not intensity leading up to race day. That's usually par for the course, right? What we usually
Yeah, that's
recommend.
pretty standard tapering advice, yeah.
He says, but a lot of and he says in quotes, intensity in enduro and downhill racing is very physically taxing. It's a full body workout doing lift assisted or shuttle runs near race pace. Mm-hmm. And for those that haven't done that sort of a thing, this is me going off script here a bit, but Nate and I rode recently up at North Star, did some lift laps. Nate's throwing the horns right now. It's tiring, isn't it, Nate?
Oh, yes.
like it's crazy. Like chances are the people listening to this that train, chances are you're probably much more fit in terms of pedaling a bike than a lot of these people. But then you'll show up at this spot and there'll be guys, with beer bellies and they're, they look like downhill bros, but they can just go top to bottom and they're really, it's a different type of strength.
And as you get
endurance.
A better mountain biker, you use your body more.
Mm-hmm.
I think we were halfway down a run and I stopped and I couldn't speak to Jonathan. I was so, I did not do one pedal stroke or maybe
Right.
like two pedal strokes.
Yeah.
Sprinting out of a corner or something. That's it. And I could not breathe, like talk.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So it's not restful. Taking the lift up and descending down is not restful.
It's not like road riding where it is
Just
restful.
sail down a hill.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a different type of strength. So he says, should I cool my jets on doing that sort of race simulation shortly before an event to allow my body to be as fresh as possible on race day and instead move my workouts indoors and maintain the cardiovascular intensity only? And then he asks, what about gym work? I hit the gym twice a week and follow a basic starting strength, strong lift style routine that's mostly squats, deadlifts, and various upper body presses. I also do hot vinyasa style yoga once or twice a week. So he has a bunch of questions. We're going to go back through them in a bit, but we're going to read through the whole thing. It says, I'm just trying to find the right balance of training and recovery to make sure I perform to the best of my abilities. I'm racing the Big Mountain Enduro in Winter Park this weekend, which he already did. That was just this past weekend. It says, then U.S. National Champs there 2 weeks later on a Thursday, and the Big Mountain and Telluride just 2 days after that. I've got a big solid base thanks to all the endurance racing and big rides I've done this year, so I'm not worried about completing the races, but I want to make sure I can be as explosive as possible. That's a key term there. Mm-hmm. So he says, thanks so much. Trainer Road has helped my wife's and my own riding immensely over the last few seasons. She's won 3 pro races already this year.
What?
And she's a new mountain biker, relatively speaking, by the way. Jeez. When they met, she wasn't a mountain biker.
At the pro level.
Yep. And he says, and is currently training up in the mountains, indoors and out, to rock Breck Epic next month. 5 stars. Look forward to 80 more episodes about Cape Epic. Also, quick thing. Noah is from MRP, the suspension company, but he's also an ex-pro downhill racer. He's very good. And he is a very good, Grand Junction off-road, I think in the 35-mile variant, he's usually like battling for the win. So he is very fast, very uphill and downhill, and very capable in that regard. So I guess the first thing that we should cover, where he says, how should one taper for an enduro or DH race? Do you want to cover that from a big, picture scale, and then we can go from there, Chad?
Yeah, so kind of what we were just talking about with strength training, how you can be really strong without packing a lot of mass. There's some certain parallels here. And to be really good at the short, hard stuff that actually do require really high force outputs, you have to have a lot of really strong central communication. So your brain, spinal cord, your nervous system needs to be speaking to your muscles really well, and that only happens with really fresh riders. So you can't carry a bunch of fatigue into an event like that and expect to perform at your best. You simply can't do it. It'd be the same with a match sprint or anything that's super short like that. And just in this case, with enduro, you're either on the gas or off the gas, still working, as we just mentioned, but you're really taxing your muscles, or you're not taxing them in the same way. Your body's more working to keep you upright. So it's super important that you nail the taper. You can't, dragging fatigue into an event like this will cost you. So you obviously have to figure out what works in terms of the taper. But it can be, just like you described it, you still want to maintain the high intensity. You just have to knock the volume way back, probably grow the recoveries, and just not do a lot of overall work. Your taper workout should leave you feeling better after the workout than when you started the workout. So if they don't refresh you in some way, you probably overdid it. Next time, don't go quite so deep during your taper workout.
You were telling me, how many runs can Noah do?
Yeah, he was doing, I think that he did so the mountain bike park probably opens at around 9 a.m. and then it closes, it looks like around 5 or 7, and he does nonstop top to bottoms all day.
That's so much work.
Like how many though?
It's probably got to be 30 runs or more.
Yeah, I think 3, pretty tired after 3.
It's hard.
Yeah, so he's clearly built up a high level of endurance and resiliency, and he can repeat these and probably do it really well every time.
Yeah.
And when it starts to break down, maybe he starts picking different lines, or dials it down so he doesn't hurt himself. But the fact is, he can handle a lot of work. So his taper is going to be a lot different than our taper would be.
Just like an pro Ironman athlete, if they're doing 30 hours a week, they're going to taper to probably your biggest week you've ever had.
Yeah.
Yeah, seriously.
Like 15 hours.
They knock it down too far, they will actually detrain too much prior to their event, and that's obviously not desirable.
So for Noah too, for enduros that have lifts, or I guess any enduro you can pre-ride, it's important to ride the course ahead of time, right?
It's extremely important. Some enduros don't allow you to recon an event, but most of them here in the United States do.
Enduro, okay.
Yeah, and it's extremely important. You have to know the course.
So he would still go do the lift or ride to do it, but he would just do less. Still be probably like race intensity, Chad, but it would be a lot less, not 30 runs.
Yeah, maybe it's 5 or 6 runs and call it a day. Basically, you're just trying to... There's a physiological side to it and a psychological side to it, and honestly, I think the psychological side is far more important. There are reasons to keep basically the sympathetic system ramped a bit, so that you don't come down into that sympathetic recovery sort of physiologic state. So for that reason, do the taper. That's clearly physiological, but the psychological, feeling ready for it, feeling like you've done everything you can, feeling like you're still in touch with what it feels like to go deep. All these things are really important.
And tactical, or skills-wise, tactical to know,
absolutely,
hey, on this corner, I have to come to this line, and this corner I have to come to this line.
Yeah,
Because that's really probably the biggest benefit between riding blind. How much time can you save, Jonathan, do you think, on let's say a 5-minute run if you have like pre-rided a bunch.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Like so, for a person like me, who's a I would say an average descender, relatively speaking, compared to the best enduro guys, right?
Yeah, to the best enduro.
It's just like
I'm equal to the average best enduro.
Yeah, sure. But like the
North Star.
Yeah.
You got a top 10 descending. Like North Star, thousands of people. Like, be like 5,000 people, and you were 7th.
Yeah, and then Richie Rude showed up at EWS last year, and I think he beat my time by minutes on a 5-minute descent.
You're not average. I'm just saying.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
Safely above average.
The interesting thing about it though is the fact that like depending on the course, but almost every course, the more you ride it and the more you take your time to break it down and analyze it, and to really think the line choice through and think about how you're gonna spend your energy throughout it. You can drop like, for example, I'm thinking of a run called Boondocks up at North Star that's just local to us, and that's going to be part of the EWS race that's coming up this year, which I'm excited to race. That'll be fun. But that run takes people usually, I think the first time I did it, it took me about 9 minutes, 10 minutes, and I think that my fastest time on it was somewhere under 5 minutes, right?
Wow.
So it shows you can really just cut out so much time, and it's really all about momentum preservation and making sure that you can keep the energy going.
Familiarity with the course goes a long ways, and Nate's a real good testament to this because your times up in North Star have come, they're like night and day.
Oh, yeah.
Different.
Yeah, 50% decrease.
Yeah. You're
pretty
improving as a rider, so your general skills is going to carry over to anything you do on the downhill, but right now you're getting really good at these courses, and you're posting some really fast times.
Well, as a true average rider, I can say that because I'm ahead of average on
You're
some
ahead
stuff.
of average, yeah.
But it's the eliminating of fear in sections. So that's another one.
It's a big component. That's one of the general grabs.
Yeah. Jonathan does not have probably fear going down any of these runs, but I think a lot of people, you see something, you're like, oh, I'm scared of that. But if the more you ride it, the more you can open the brakes, and then it seems slower, and there's no fear. So it's really, I can't imagine not. Jonathan, pre-riding stuff. Say what at Whistler, the 3 signs.
Oh yeah. It has,
this is a good thing to say for everyone that's not Noah.
Yeah, I think it has a pre-ride. So whenever you're riding up the lifts, they have like signs everywhere to tell you this. Okay. And it says, first you need to pre-ride, then you need to re-ride, then you can free ride. It's like a funny little thing that it has. But and sometimes like when a guy will crash and you're on the lift and you see him crash, people yell out like, you didn't re-ride, like just joking around. But yeah, and it's extremely important. And you'll see, for example, when EWS North Star will be here, there will be riders here for a week to 2 weeks ahead of time, and they will just be every day doing laps. And what they'll do is they'll break down, like they won't try to go ride the course, examine a whole entire run, then go back up and try to pick up their pace all the way through. Instead, what they'll do is they'll really focus on one specific part, and they'll think, okay, I really need to nail this line here, and coming into this next section, I'll nail this line. And then it's a pretty short section of it. And then they'll just keep doing laps, and they work their way up or down that course in terms of where they want to refine. And then they'll try to link it together.
And that's
later.
allowed, that many riders, that early ahead of a race, isn't that going to change some of the course characteristics?
Oh, and it absolutely does.
All day long on race day, it changes, right?
Yep. Yeah, and that's part of it.
Even without rain and obvious.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is you'll actually, on a lot of these, and this goes with cyclocross too, this goes with anything where you're dealing with changing surface conditions like this. You start to, when you're riding, you actually look for where things are going to break down. So you look at spots where it's like, okay, everyone's bridging right here, but it's a really narrow shelf, and there's only like a rock holding you in, but it looks like if we keep riding that, the rut's going to develop and that line's going to be bad. So sometimes your best lines kind of go away. But
did that happen in motocross too?
Oh yeah, well that's the biggest example. Every single lap, everything you come through changes entirely. So you have to be dynamic and adhere to principles instead of this is the exact line I need to follow.
You got to be a flexible rider, adaptable.
Oh yeah.
I like that pre-ride, re-ride, then free ride as just a culture thing to know that your first time down, you gotta let's go slow.
Take your time.
Let's go to relaxed pace.
That goes for XC courses, cyclocross courses. It even goes for criteriums.
Oh,
I said before, every lap you get just a little bit better, and now you're finally into free ride territory for maybe the last third half of the race.
Yeah, it's key. I want to focus this in because we kind of talked about it, but we didn't say it, explicitly here. But openers, because if I show up like Noah's going to a day or two before an event like this, you'll notice if a road cyclist does that, they might go and recon a course. If it's a crit, they'll recon it, but they'll definitely work in some openers. And Chad, you mentioned physical and psychological benefits behind that.
Yeah.
So what should people be going for? And you said, first of all, the day prior, but what should people be going for with openers?
Just basically the intensity, the energy systems you're going to use in the race, touch on them a bit. I mean, probably you don't have to touch easy aerobic. You don't need to get, I see a lot of people who do what they call an opener workout that includes an hour and a half of easy riding. That to me is not an opener workout. Anything over an hour is not an opener workout. I would keep it short and sweet. I don't care what your event is. All you're doing is accumulating fatigue. There's no benefit in that. And then, you know, if it's an event that requires explosive efforts, definitely do some explosive efforts. If you're going to hit a 2-minute hill, maybe do a 2-minute hill, but something similar and keep it short and sweet.
Yeah.
And absolutely has to be the day prior. I honestly don't know a single athlete who can do nothing the day prior to a race and not come into that race flat. I've never seen that work. And I've done it myself. I've had athletes do it. I've seen athletes do it. It never pans out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did it work?
Yeah, I did. I think before Iserman, I took a whole 6 days off.
Yeah, that might be a little different considering you're talking about a 112-mile steady state effort.
Yeah.
So that might be one of the exceptions to that.
Yeah.
But even then, I think if you just got out and spun the legs for a half hour, an hour the day prior.
Actually, I think I rode my bike very short around the little like town in Israel that did it, but I don't think I did any openers. But I was very fatigued, super fatigued coming in.
Yeah,
so I was.
And there are situations. I mean, if you're carrying a ton of fatigue into something that's a long endurance event like that, it might actually benefit you.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're going to pull a ton of that fatigue into the event. So, you know, always exceptions. I haven't seen.
Sorry,
them.
Chad.
No, it's okay.
Nate breaks the rules again.
If it worked, it worked.
Thinking of Noah's specific situation, if you're a downhill or enduro racer and listening to this, you can kind of combine those or make those openers pretty easy in the sense, not in effort, but they're logistically easy because you're going down the hill. Chances are you're reconning the trail.
Sure.
And then you can basically say, like, I'm just going to, this portion of the course, I'm going to throw in some really hard accelerations out of the turns.
Why not? Some of the spots where you plan to be really fast, you plan to make those sections matter, hit them super hard. Use those as your openers so that you can see what they're like at speed, first off, but also to kind of, open the legs.
Yeah, and chances are you don't need to go after that or before that. You don't need to go find a smooth section of road and do some openers if you've already done it there.
I would make them as course specific as possible with something like with enduro or downhill.
Yeah, and even XC, I would say it's
definitely.
It's an
Anything
important
like
thing to do.
Even a technical spot on a quick course. Learn how to take it at speed, go real fast. If you plan to perhaps break away and I'm going to carry a ton of speed into a turn that I'm unfamiliar with, terrible idea.
Everything changes at race pace, right? It's all very
Even if you
different.
have a good wheel to follow. If you aren't comfortable with that sort of speed, that sort of handling, you best get comfortable with it.
Yeah, and looking at Noah's history, it's pretty clear that he can sustain quite a lot with this sort of downhilling and everything else that he has. But for I think that the point here on openers is you aren't going to, your goal isn't to stress the system. Like Chad said, you're just trying to touch on similar demands that you'll have.
It's to prime it.
Just during the race day. So I find a huge psychological effect of openers too. Call me dramatic, but in my head, I put myself in the race situation when I'm going through those openers, and I absolutely emulate what I will experience on race day.
Yep.
Right?
And it's a little risky in that sense because you can go out and say, man, I feel terrible the day prior to the race and I feel terrible and get in your own head.
Yes.
On the other side of that, you can go out and say, wow, I feel amazing. I'm going to own this.
I almost like it when I feel terrible because I'm like, okay, I'm coming up. If I feel amazing,
If you
I'm
recognize
like,
that.
I should have raced today. Like I messed it up. I do. I like having fatigue, a little bit of fatigue right before.
Yeah.
And then the next day it comes up.
Sure.
Yeah.
And you've probably done it enough times to recognize that so that fatigue doesn't psych you out anymore.
No, it doesn't. No.
Yeah.
I know it's coming back.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the interesting thing that I take from it too when I have a disappointing opener experience is I basically just sit back and I go, you know what? It's fine. Now I have some information. I at least know where I sit, and I can be better tomorrow. You know what I mean? So then I just double down on recovery, make sure I'm doing the right thing.
So you figured out what works for you, and that probably works for a lot of riders, but you know for sure it works for you.
Yep. Yeah, exactly right. And the other thing that, once again, we've hit on this again, but like with this sort of rider, strength training is so important. We rarely talk about enduro or DH, which for EWS, well, hopefully, I'm going to try to shoot for this, work some connections. It would be great to like have my race runs done, then have somebody like Richie Rugg critique me. I think that would be awesome to see because then he might just think, why in the world would you go that slow? So that might not be great, but
Is this in slow-mo, bro?
yeah, exactly. But that would be really cool.
I can't wait to see somebody critique Jonathan.
Someone like that, especially.
Yeah, exactly.
It would be awesome to see, or at the very least, maybe compare our lines because I think that he usually rides in races with the GoPro, so that could be really cool.
And he's a Yeti athlete, right?
He is. Yeah. The
connections.
top one. I'll give it a shot. That would be really interesting. And then we also talked with Nate about going up to North Star and actually doing some line choice analysis where we basically look at Nate's stuff and where I would have gone on a trail and we can stop and highlight it. So adding to the race analysis stuff. If you're interested in that, just let us know. And if you're joining on YouTube, you can let us know with a comment down below.
Yeah, that's a big thing is will people watch that?
Yeah, exactly.
I think the race analysis stuff with the crits, we know people like that, but the mountain bike stuff was their interest.
Yeah, so let us know. Yeah, absolutely. And if you're watching this video on YouTube, you can do that live. Give us a thumbs up. That sort of stuff really helps. So, Chad, you had something that you wanted to...
Can I interrupt you for this?
Yeah,
I want to get that clip done because I didn't want to interrupt it, but it goes on to what we just said. I'm about to do next weekend the Santa Rosa half Ironman 70.3 as a relay with my wife and another podcast listener. He's going to do the swim. We're going to go as fast as we can. I don't know if there's a co-ed podium. I hope so.
Yeah.
Got a shot.
Yeah. A relay is so liberating, right? Like,
it's a pretty fun thing.
Especially when everyone else is doing the whole thing.
Yeah.
Because you just get to fly by people and be like, see you, sucker, because I don't have to run. And I understand that. Like, you can put out many more watts when you don't have to do a run and you can just swim.
You can just fall off the bike.
But for a 56-mile time trial, that's going to be mostly sweet spot, tempo sweet spot kind of area. Yeah. How would you do an opener the day before?
Sweet spot repeats. Basically the intensity you plan to maintain. I wouldn't do anything sharp. I don't know what the point in that would be. And I wouldn't do anything super easy. So just go out and do, I don't know, I'm sure we've got one, I can't think of the name of it, but maybe 2 5-minute sweet spots separated by 5 minutes of rest or 10 minutes rest, whatever.
Okay. The other thing that I've always done before triathlons, because usually these bigger ones, you're always traveling. When you do that, try to do it like pretty early in the morning. Because you have athlete check-in and stuff the day before, but if you're doing these, you got to put your bike together. This is the test of your bike, and that's, I think, more important than the actual
if you've
opener.
traveled or worked on your bike recently, that's another reason to do an opener's workout.
During a torque wrench, check all your bolts, people. I will be checking them many times. But also that allows that if you do have a mechanical, which happens all the time, you've got the whole day to figure it out. Where if you were to do this, you go to athlete check-in, you go to the pre-race meeting. It's 4 o'clock. You do your ride. I don't think I like more like a 24-hour separation for recovery between your opener and it, rather than like a 12-hour or like a 14-hour at the end of the day. But also, bike shops are open on the Saturday or the Friday at 10 a.m. Where if you do it at 4 or 5, you could be.
And do you have to check your bike in the night before, or morning of?
I don't know about this race,
but it does depend, right? In
some races you do. Kona you do. I've done a few where you have to check in the night before. Then you got to not sneak a pump, and you walk with a pump and get your tire pressure right.
Yeah.
Depends on the race. I prefer, a lot of them are in the morning though. That's obviously a lot nicer.
Yeah, that would be a lot easier. This is going to be exciting.
It is.
I'm excited to see how Nate does.
I haven't ridden my TT bike since. I guess we did one TT.
We did.
And then before that was our 40K TT challenge that didn't end so well.
Do you have a goal time for this?
Top wattage? Pros do it in like 202, 210 to 202. I don't want to say a goal time because if I don't do it. So I have a goal wattage, maybe. Okay. I haven't been on that bike though. So I'm doing my whole race rehearsal the weekend before. On Saturday, this is another tip. On Saturday, I'm going to do my entire rehearsal, nutrition, same time in the morning. I'm going to get up at the same time I'm going to do on race day. I'm going to do the same breakfast. I'm going to do the same amount of caffeine. I'm going to do beet juice. What else?
We just did this very thing with Amarette. She's got a triathlon on Sunday, so we did a full-on race rehearsal on Tuesday. And her headspace going into that race rehearsal and coming out of it, very different.
I feel like that's a huge benefit for triathlon, especially because there's like us cyclists have such a simple experience compared to triathlon.
Triathlon so much more complicated.
Oh yeah, and at the very least, just psychologically speaking, it can be really helpful to do that.
It was,
and it doesn't have to replicate the exact distance you do.
No, we did. I think her swim actually exceeded the swim distance, but she's a very good swimmer and it stayed relaxed. Then we went and did the mean climb and the scary descent. Coming back. And then she ran for literally, I think, 8 minutes. Just did a 4-minute out, 4-minute back. Donner.
Donner Lake Tri.
Cool.
Yeah,
the international
that one's scary.
It is scary. And that's why I keep telling her, I say, it's okay to be scared. This is a scary descent. And you're doing it on a road bike. Imagine the people doing it on a TT bike.
So on that descent, that is the one, this is back in the day when there was a lot of aluminum wheels with the tube. I used my brakes so much that my rear tire popped descending.
Oh, good.
Yikes.
And that messed me up for like
Long
years until I got
yeah.
disc brakes, really, because now I can use my brakes whenever I wanted. But I was
Yeah.
so afraid to touch my brakes during descent because I was afraid I'd heat up the rims and it would then pop the tire.
Yeah, it's scary.
The tube. And now that there's tubeless tires and disc brakes,
It's nice.
we just had. Sorry, what? I'll talk about this in a second.
Yeah.
I'm just derailing this whole podcast. But this is good to know about the tip of not hitting your brakes too much. If you have aluminum brakes, you just get disc brakes. But also, I'm going to pre-ride with a disc wheel. I think that's very important because even just like, is your tire on that right? Is the cassette on there right?
Oh, yeah.
And on my aero helmet that I'm going to use for race day, I see a lot of triathletes and they train with like they're afraid to use their race wheels and they think that the aero helmet looks dorky.
Yeah.
But the aero helmet weighs more than your regular helmet. The venting is completely different.
The noise inside is different. There's a lot of unfamiliarity.
Your sight line will be different. You might be, it might be inhibiting with your position.
You might think this is a good position for my head when in fact you need to be up here.
Yep.
It's
The visor, you might have sunglasses with a road helmet, then a visor. You could be dripping sweat on the visor, not be able to see. Like, there's all these
Lot
things.
of things.
So just go out. I mean, when I was a triathlete too, I'd use the disc wheel every time because you want to feel how that disc wheel handles. You get a wind gust.
It handles totally differently. Like going from the NV78 that we had in the rear on my TT bike, then going to the disc wheel. At turnarounds, for example, when you're slowing down and leaning into that turn, the disc wheel doesn't torque nearly as much, right? Yeah. So your bike wants to stutter more if you're braking hard and coming into a turn.
Take a rough road surface, just a 90-degree turn on a disc versus a spoked wheel. Very different experience.
Oh,
That disc wheel is pretty unforgiving.
Yep.
So that messed me up. The tube popping. The other thing messed me up. We just did a sprint. We recorded a sprint video. Did we talk about this yet?
Good.
Yeah, let's. We haven't talked about it yet, but we can
We
talk
won't talk about
Release
what we're
that
doing.
as a set. Oh, okay. No.
Yeah.
My chain slipped off the front chain ring in the middle of a sprint on
Right when
camera.
the sprint was ramping up.
You died like 3 deaths in 3 seconds.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
and somehow saved all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But now, I mean, the next
Now
sprint
you're
is on
afraid to
Tuesday.
press on the pedals too hard, right?
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
think
but
so.
it was equipment breakdown or equipment failure. It wasn't you. It wasn't user error.
I bent the chain ring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
The chain
like-
ring wasn't bent coming in. You bent it.
Yeah.
You bent it during this?
Yes.
Oh, I thought it happened because of.
No.
Oh, okay, never mind.
So, but I was in 5311, and it was a low cadence, high force drill.
You're still going 20 something miles an hour, so you're still moving pretty quick.
I know. So I'm switching to Dura Ace, and hopefully I'm switching chains and switching front chain ring, and I'm never doing a low cadence, high force drill again in my life.
So you were in your gear rolling into this. You didn't do any shifting just
Nope,
prior.
no shifting.
That's
You can
unfortunate.
see in the video I was.
Well,
like,
this was a specific drill that we were working on.
No, I get
this
it, but
one,
there was
yeah.
no gear changing, so it just
Right.
happened.
It just
There's
happened.
like no way to anticipate that. I hate that stuff.
So I can already
Yes.
see the comments flooding in, and everyone's yelling
Oh.
SRAM. And I just want to make sure that we make clear the fact that you were on a Shimano drivetrain. You just had different chain rings that came with your. It was just the Praxis chain
Doesn't
rings,
matter what
right?
brand it is.
Praxis chain ring,
but
YBN chain.
people think
Bad
it
luck,
does,
yeah.
right? Yeah. So, but that's what happens.
chain was probably 3 hours old.
Yeah.
Chain ring and cassette were probably, I don't know, less than a month old.
Chain
Did you
didn't
run
break.
back through? Was there a sticky link in it or anything?
Nope, it wasn't. I can you can look at the chain ring and you put like a tape measure below, and as you go through, right in the section where it looks like I dropped the chain, you can see it come out.
It's bent.
Yikes.
Yeah. So, chain was fine. Pretty terrifying.
Yeah, and to be fair to Praxis, it could have been the chain. It maybe could have been impacted when I
It's
don't
hard
know.
to know.
Yeah, exactly. So there are a lot of variables that we don't have control over. There's what I think it is, but then there's the real life thing.
I think you just have a massive amount of force, Nate, and it bent the chain ring.
That's probably it.
It's those big old legs.
It's the aero
That's
legs,
it.
man.
That's it. So stay tuned for that. We'll actually have a full video on sprint analysis that we're working on for this. So it'll be good stuff. And stay tuned for that. Chad, you wanted to add in a bit of additional information. Last week we did kind of a deep dive on body
Just one
fat.
tidbit. Yep.
So you just wanted to add on one thing on brown fat specifically.
You got it. If you listen to last week's podcast, we differentiated between white adipose tissue and brown adipose tissue. And if you were subject to my brain fade that was impossibly long, but thanks to Nate's grace, he swooped in and bailed me out, bought me a couple of seconds, but I actually omitted a line from my notes, and it just completely derailed me, and it just happened to be basically the linchpin of the explanation. And the primary difference between brown adipose tissue or brown fat and white fat is that brown fat has mitochondria. Mitochondria are little furnaces. I mean, they're what metabolize our substrate and make. This is why brown fat can burn fat. It was crucial, and I left it out. So if you haven't listened to it yet, keep that in mind when you go back and listen to it. And if you did listen to it, maybe listen to it again. It'll make a heck of a lot more sense knowing that this type of fat actually has mitochondria.
If you went to high school in the U.S., you would know that the mitochondria are the powerhouse
Indeed.
of the
powerhouse of the cell.
of the cell.
Yeah.
That's what we just thought. That's like one of the only things I remember from biology.
Yeah, that's that term.
Yeah.
Search on powerhouse of the cell, you'll probably get more hits on Google than you will if you search on mitochondria.
Yeah, that's true. So we are going to really quickly touch on Tahoe Trail 100. So I did this last weekend. Nate, you did it the year before. And I thought last year, I was like, I'd never want to do that race. And sure enough, here I was doing it. So and I had a great day, actually. It was a lot of fun, and I enjoyed it. I pre-rode the course beforehand, and I missed a section of the course on the pre-ride that I actually ended up loving on race day, and it was a really fun single track. They call it the Walternate. That was a blast. That was a lot of fun. It was really cool.
So on this race, Jonathan has nationals in how many weeks?
And a week and a half.
Week and a half.
A little less than a week and a half, actually. Yeah, a week and a day.
A week and a day.
She raced on a Friday.
So a question coming in here was, can I do Tahoe Trail and not hurt my performance at nationals? And what we said is, well, yeah, just ride it kind of a bit easier. You just need to get red corral, which was a 5:15. You'll get that no matter what. It's fine. Jonathan's like, sweet, let's do it. He rode in. He came in. He was just pacing normally or easy.
Yeah.
He came in 27 seconds below silver, which is a 4:45. So he beat that by 27 seconds. Didn't even mean to. So now he is.
I didn't know that was a thing.
But now you are.
That was so good.
Which is super annoying because afterwards he just kept saying, "Oh yeah, I wasn't pushing, just putting logs on the roadie, rolling coal."
Yeah, just rolling coal, keeping a log on the fire.
But I think it's the there's a couple things I want to say about this. One is you're now in Silver Corral.
Yeah.
Which is super cool. So there's gold.
For Leadville, we should say.
Yeah, Leadville.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
There's gold corral where at Tahoe Trail 100, almost no one gets. There's like 2 or 3 people.
Like a 4:15, right?
Yeah, it's like Levi Leipheimer and
Alex Wild won it this year.
Alex Wild,
yeah.
But I think the guy who was the really fast road rider who has Stetina.
Peter Stetina.
I think did he miss it because he had a
mechanical and he had to run for quite a while.
So he's in the same corral as Jonathan, right?
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
The second thing that is amazing about this is that the amount of food you ate, especially historically with your stomach.
Eye-opening.
Yeah.
Can you go over that?
Yeah, so I have historically, like you said, very fussy stomach. Can't tolerate a lot of things, and nutrition has been a hard thing. I even for one season, I didn't intentionally become fat adapted. I just eating screwed everything up, so I just ate less, and as a result, I'm sure I left a ton of low hanging fruit because I couldn't train very hard, right? But now, so basically. I took in, so here's what I ate. So the race took 4 hours and 44 minutes once again, but here's what I ate. I had 5.5 packets of Mar10 320. So that's their 320, basically 320 calories in one thing.
Roughly 80 grams of carb.
80 grams of carbs each. And I had that in, I started off with a bottle on my bike and then a bottle in my jersey and no pack. And then once I came around on the second lap, I picked up my pack. Everyone always asks what that pack is. It's a USWE, USWE, and I had the Airborne 3.
They're good packs.
Yep, they're good packs. So then I took the pack on that had 2.5 bottles in there, and then I had another bottle on my bike. The bottles on my bike were tall bottles, so it allowed some extra. So once again, 5.5 packets of Mar10 320 at 79 grams of carbs each. So that's 435 grams roughly of carbs.
Let me stop you there.
That's a lot.
That would be a lot. It would be like, Jonathan, good job.
Yeah.
That's over 100 grams an hour.
I kept going. Yeah.
Continue.
I had 3 Mar10 gels. I would have had more of them, but all I had was 3, and I thought I had more. There's a note. Always make sure that you have the nutrition you need before the race. So those gels are 25 grams of carbs each. So that's an additional 75 grams that I got from those. And then I basically, once I found out I didn't have enough gels, I scrambled and I found a pack of orange scratch chews. And those are 40 grams of carbs. So altogether, it was roughly 550 grams of carbs that we got over 4 hours and 44 minutes. So that comes down to about 123 grams of carbs an hour, which we talked about this last week, right? The whole 90 grams of carb being like a ceiling of what you can absorb. And usually if you don't absorb it, it should manifest itself in the form of gas and diarrhea, right? And luckily didn't have any sort of GI discomfort after the race, which was great.
But then Mitchelson Scott, when they looked at it, they're doing 80 to 100?
Yeah.
And I would argue that this day that he did is probably similar to a lot of tour days.
Sure.
For the amount of like the demand of it, not the big huge days, but
Right.
But this is just, I mean, we come from a time where it was 60 grams an hour. That's all you're going to be able to ingest. Then we found out if we combine glucose with fructose, we can push that up to like 90 gram for a lot of athletes. And then some athletes can tolerate 100, 110. Now we're seeing 123, 120 plus from an athlete who has a sensitive GI tract or stomach probably.
Yep. It's crazy.
It's eye-opening, to say the least. I mean, it's anecdotal. It's a one-time thing, but you made it work, and you didn't do a whole bunch of build-up leading into it. It's not like you cultivated this capability to tolerate high levels of incoming carbohydrate.
Yes. Thank you. So someone, before on a previous podcast, I recommended people try the high end first if you've never done it, and then reduce.
Yeah.
Someone said, that's the worst. Nate, you're dumb. Like people love to hate on me. That's fine. I'm polarizing. I understand. But they said you got to go up on it. But I would argue sometimes you never know how far you can go unless you just try it.
Yeah.
Why not dive into the deep end once in a while?
And this was the perfect race to do it in because it was long. You were going to get, even if you had GI distress, you're going to get the 5:15 time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But now for Leadville, like you can have so many more carbs, and that's going to be such an advantage at Leadville.
And if your body can use it, look what that does to. I mean, it doesn't give you more work capacity. It lets you actually exploit the work capacity you've developed through all your training.
And he seriously, like, you looked fine afterwards, and we
I
hung
felt
out,
fine.
And he felt
you
fine.
ate.
And that's the other thing for the rest of the day. It's not like he went
whole
and
day.
spent the next couple of hours on the toilet.
Yeah, and when I went home, I didn't, feel like I needed to gorge myself. I was hungry after it, right? And for calories.
That too is informative.
Yeah, like 2,200 calories is what I took in roughly. And I probably burned, so my power meter drifted throughout the whole race, down. And I know that's super convenient seeming, right? Because your body also tends to drift down. But in this case, I was going up climbs at wattages that I shouldn't have been able to even get up.
It was like 180 watts, and you were like destroying people, like
145 pounds.
Yeah, 147
You're not getting up the hills at that speed, at that wattage.
Yeah, so I probably burned somewhere around 3,500 calories. And mountain biking obviously also introduces a whole lot of additional caloric burn than we can measure with just pedals, right? But so it wasn't like I finished calorie positive or anything, but I wasn't starved. I never through the race felt starved. When I finished the race, I felt hungry because it was lunchtime. Like it was, it's just normal.
And another key thing about this is if I think when people have gastric distress, they can't eat lunch afterwards. You just don't want to eat anything. And we ate pizza and you had lunch afterwards and you were fine. Yeah. I'm just saying, like, I don't think it was in your head. You actually, like, it really was fine.
It was fine. We do, we should mention that the Martin,
that's
is that gel coated or that algae coated stuff. So there is a coating on it that they have at least one study so far that surfaced at the ACM conference this year that showed how it clears the stomach, and it does leave the stomach like a third of the time faster than regular maltodextrin fructose mix. Yeah. So there is something to the fact that it doesn't sit in your stomach as long, and I think that's where you're encountering most of your irritability. And then it gets into the small intestine, and the absorption takes place at whatever rate it takes place. I didn't get that far. I don't know if the study did either, but the fact is it got out of your stomach faster. It didn't sit there and give you enough time to get the stomach upset.
Yeah.
Jonathan's done fake Martan though, without that, and had the same results.
Yeah. So
I wonder 123 grams an hour.
Yes, actually, I have. Yeah, in a training ride before. Yeah. So the interesting thing with this is that I wonder how much of it just comes down to the 2-to-1 glucose fructose ratio, and kind of that's it, instead of adding a bunch of other stuff into it.
It's maltodextrin and fructose. Maltodextrin being the key part of it. That maybe you're fine eating
long chain glucose, so it breaks down a little slower.
Maybe you're fine having maltodextrin, where other stuff you're not. Like sucrose.
Yeah, it's super interesting. Like, and I don't want this to be like. I mean, I guess it is just inherently, but like, ever since I switched to trying this Marten stuff, it's been big for me because, like I said, that was a huge challenge, and I bet that's why I've come to hate long stuff. It's just because I've had so many bad fueling experiences and stomach issues. Sure. So it's been a huge change.
Yeah, and it's not like this is some endorsement for Martin, but it is something that clearly works for you.
Yep. Yeah.
so they don't give me anything. But I want to stress you had fake Martan and had the same results as the expensive Martan.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. I think the principles behind it, The
key thing, I think, is for everyone, the takeaway from this is to keep trying different stuff. Yep. Because if you did this through, let's say, just normal sports drink, I think you would be throwing up on the course.
Yeah, and not just different stuff, but different amounts of stuff, too.
Yep.
I mean, I would never recommend someone go out and try to ingest 120 grams of carbohydrate an hour over a long event. It would
just be really hard.
Flies in the face of everything we found. You would. I wouldn't.
Yeah. There's lots of...
Now that I think it's possible.
It's more
eye-opening.
It's reported more that like pro teams are doing it, and like we would Jeff Kabush when he did Dirty Kansas. I think it was this level of carbs.
The whole entire race,
just huge carbohydrate amounts.
Yep.
The whole entire race
with the Nike. This is what Martin did with Nike for the 2 hour. They were doing, I think, what is it, 80 grams of carbs or 90 grams of carbs while you're running.
Which is a different deal.
Yeah,
exactly.
Kipchoge, I think it was. Okay, he was taking them at frequent intervals too.
Yeah.
Actually, I think he liked the longer intervals. I don't know.
It's pretty crazy. Yeah, it's super impressive stuff. But it's changed things for me.
One last thing I want to say about this is Martan, Maurten.
Yeah.
The Leadville podcast with
Eldon Nelson,
which is
the
awesome
fat cyclist known as. Yeah.
Awesome podcast.
He's
they call it Morton.
Yeah.
So you might call here Morton. I think you talked to them specifically.
Yes.
They're from Europe.
Yes. Martin.
That's how you say it.
Yep. Yeah. That's the way that we should pronounce it. So, the other side of things outside of the nutrition was the pacing side of things. And I think that, we've talked about this before, and Chad, you've mentioned this plenty of times that, data should inform perception,
always,
right?
Yeah.
There are certain cases where, you might feel like you're dying and you can push a little harder and you're toward the end of a race, that's one thing. But when we're talking about pacing for a long event, especially, it's key to keep that in mind. And especially in this case, because if I had ridden by numbers, I would have just been walking, right? Because my power meter was kind of going down. Yeah. But I feel like I paced pretty well on this one. It was 2 laps, and the 2 lap times actually were really close to each other, not that far off. I probably went a little too hard on the first climb, probably a good amount too hard, but I never felt like I was going really deep. And then throughout the rest of the race, I just tried to kind of hold on to that feeling that you have when you know that you're just like that tempo feeling, right? Where it's, you're going to have a 5-hour day, so you can't ride a threshold. So it's just making sure that you're staying on the gas, so to speak. It's like an easy hard, if that makes sense. Yeah. It's not comfortable, but it's just,
sustainable.
Yeah, and it's not like I was out of like gasping for air or anything at any point either. So.
I think you were like 30 seconds within on your lap times, which on this course is crazy. Everyone else goes too hard on the first lap and then slows down a bunch.
Some solid pacing.
Yeah, and on that first climb, there were people blowing by me with like really loud VO2 breathing, and I'm like, man, we got a long race. It's not a good idea.
It's solid pacing that netted you a really good time too. Yeah. So anybody can go slow and nail their splits, but you went pretty fast and got your splits within a real slim margin.
And you will go faster if you do that. There's Ross Tucker. He's from South Africa, and his mentor was Noakes. And he did a study of like looking at all world record breaking times, and unlike in time trials and running and cycling, almost all of them are a negative split. Just a teeny, I think he said virtually all of them are a teeny tiny virtual negative split, but they are negative splits.
Just slightly.
So this idea of I'm going to go hard and bank time and then suffer in, you don't go as fast.
It doesn't work out.
And we've got data to back that up.
Yeah.
Yep. Negative splits and narrow margins.
I think is the guy's name Ross Tucker? Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool.
I blame training with power for that, by the way, just because I've done so many intervals inside in controlled circumstances, right? And you get to feel like you don't have to even look at the numbers, and you know what 300 watts feels like. You know what I mean? You know what 200 watts feels like.
Perception. And the more you do it, the more informed you become.
And it's like so easy to be able to tie that in when you do a lot of structured training. It's like a huge benefit of it, I think, that's not talked about a lot.
Except at the very beginning of a time trial or race. Yeah. At the beginning, you got to look at that power meter and be like, oh, whoa, I got to back
hold
it down.
myself back.
That might be the single best scenario for staring at your stem.
And then I think is at the very end of it, when you're in that deep hurt box and you're like, oh, I can't make it, and there's a little bit left, and you look down and your power is so low, and you're like, oh, I can kick this
I can
up.
do better now.
It's like motivation.
More. Yep.
Those are the two times. In the middle of the race, the feel
is super important.
Yeah, if you can do it by feel, it's nice.
Yep. Yeah. So it was a cool race, tons of fun, and thanks for everybody for saying hi. We saw a ton of people out there that listen to this podcast and use Trainer Road. Thanks for the polls, some of them even, when we came across the top of some climbs.
No wonder you were so fast.
Yeah, there we go. I just had a legion in front of me. They're just pulling me around.
This
right?
race is up or down. I don't know how.
Yeah.
There's maybe 4 minutes of drafting.
Yeah, but it was cool. It was a cool experience. So,
Nice.
And if you're going to Leadville, well, we'll see you at Leadville now.
Yeah, there's going to be Jonathan. I'm going to be there, and Brandon.
Yep.
And
Brandon's racing.
Yep, Brandon's racing for sure. He got his
He got a coin.
Brandon's the 5+ watt per kilo roadie, not a mountain biker. So interesting to see who's going to be faster per year too.
I think he will be.
Brandon's training to actually eat and drink on the bike because he is the opposite where for some...
He had like 2 bottles of water maybe.
And that's it.
And that's
Are you
it, yeah.
kidding?
He
Is
blew
that-
up.
Okay, because
Yeah.
you went quite a bit faster.
Yeah,
than,
he blew up.
No, it was only like
Or
7 minutes. But
Yeah.
to give you an example, Chad, on the
He
final
should have
climb...
been. He should have been a lot further ahead of me.
On the final climb on Strava...
Stetna-ish.
Yeah.
I had Stetna, not had a mechanical.
Yeah.
Final climb on Strava, I beat him up a climb.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Like
Yeah, I mean, you're quite a bit larger, and you don't push the same watts per kg.
for those who aren't in this, Brandon is an amazing climber, and for
Yes.
me to beat him up a climb is something really went bad.
Yep. He was popped.
Really bad.
So yeah. Hopefully he can nail that.
But say hi to us.
Yes, we'll see you guys there. We won't be hanging around Leadville a whole lot because we're trying to be smart with elevation. So we'll be going up, picking up our packets, then heading back down to Golden and staying there, and then driving up really early in the morning for the race. So,
Golden, okay.
Anywho, we're looking forward to it. And really though, Leadville's kind of off the radar for me because I've got nationals next week. That's the important thing. So one quick thing on this, can you rebound, right? Because that's the main question that we had. And it's interesting, even though I didn't feel super fatigued from the race, right? I feel like I rebounded well in that regard in terms of just normal feeling. But on the bike, I've noticed it over the past 2 days.
A little sluggish.
Yeah, not quite as sharp. But if anything, like the pain barrier is like lower. If you were to graph power and pain on the same like y-axis, and you were to look at it, that pain might start somewhere around like threshold, right? Or maybe just below threshold, depending on how long you're holding it. And over the past 2 days, that pain band has been a lot broader. So like it starts to hit a lot earlier on.
It's fatigue,
It doesn't seem to like hurt more the higher I go in that pain band. It all just kind of hurts. But it does have an effect for sure. So like yesterday, I changed my workout as a result. I did a sweet spot instead of going straight after VO2. Just making adjustments
That's what the
based
best
off of
athletes
what
do.
I feel.
You got to listen to yourself. Yeah.
Yep. So, Chad, this is a question that we get from a ton of people in one form or another. So basically, a big question that people have is it all revolves around aerobic metabolism. Some people call that's a portion of the Krebs cycle. It's basically...
No. Krebs cycle is a portion of
aerobic metabolism. Forgive me. But it's basically, if we're really talking about this, it's how our body takes food, makes it energy, so then we can press some pedals, right?
So we're going to dive.
So this is going to be a deep dive, and basically we're going to get into this and hopefully give you some actionable takeaways so then you can understand how it happens, because I do feel like it really does help once you get an understanding of
Absolutely, and I'll explain afterwards why this information is particularly important.
Oh, and one thing I should say too.
We're going to do this a little differently today too.
Yeah, for sure. Before we jump in, if you're watching live, you can actually see a diagram. So Chad has drawn a diagram to help walk him through this and also to help give you a walkthrough and understanding of it. And if you're watching live, producer Tucker will be switching back and forth over to this slide in between Chad and this. So then you can see it, and you can also go to forum.trainerroad.com and you can check out this diagram and pair it with what you're hearing, and it's like a perfect understanding experience.
Producer Tucker was so pumped he just did a air fist pump
He did.
about the diagram.
He's excited.
Good energy, Tucker.
Cool. Yeah, exactly. So let's dive in. I guess where do you want to start, Chad?
Okay, so if you have the diagram, you can take a peek at it. If you don't, I'm going to try really hard to assume that everyone is only listening. If you have the diagram, it's just icing on the cake. Rather, this needs to be explained in words and words alone. So originally, this was going to be a discussion on the Krebs cycle, but you can't explain the Krebs cycle without explaining what comes before it and what comes after it, because it's only one component of aerobic metabolism, and it's only one smaller component of cellular respiration, which is what we're going to talk about.
Right.
So cellular respiration, as Nate put it, is basically, or perhaps you put it, taking nutrients and making energy, in particular ATP. And we're going to jump a little bit into the inner workings of it all and start with glucose in the muscle cell. So how it got there is irrelevant.
Right
now,
yeah.
the glucose is in the cell, whether it got there through the bloodstream or whether it was already in the cell in the form of glycogen, doesn't matter. Cool. We're starting with glucose, and we're only talking about glucose. So fat and protein I'm going to touch on only very briefly a little later on. It will make sense at the time, but this is taking glucose, going all the way through cellular respiration, which from this point forward, I'm going to call cell respiration because cellular is a hard word for me.
It is a hard word. Yeah.
And then starting with glucose and finishing with 38 ATP. And that's not a hard number. I'll explain that a little later too. So cell respiration takes place in 4 stages. The first stage is anaerobic glycolysis. So there's only of the 4 stages, only the first one is anaerobic. And this is quite simply where the glucose is broken down into a couple pyruvates. And I'm going to use terms that you don't need to know what they are, and I'm going to use some acronyms. You don't even need to know what they are, but they come into play later. So I'm going to announce their arrival.
Cool.
So in anaerobic glycolysis, this anaerobic portion of cell respiration, the glucose is split into pyruvate. You get a couple ATP out of it, net, because it takes a couple to make them. It actually makes 4, but you only get 2 out of it, and a couple NADH.
Okay.
This takes place within the cytosol of the cell. So within all the goo that's supporting all the organelles and the mitochondria in particular, that's just floating around. That's where it's happening in that goo.
Cool.
So basically, this first stage is all about taking glucose, converting it to pyruvate.
Makes
then
sense.
that pyruvate is then oxidized through a process called pyruvate oxidation. This is where the aerobic respiration portion of this process, this cell respiration 4-stage process, takes place. And everything from this point forward, stages 2, 3, and 4, are all aerobic.
Got it.
So here the pyruvate is broken down, or it's metabolized. It goes through a number of reactions. It gives off a bit of CO2, a couple more of those NADH, which are going to come into play later, and something called acetyl coenzyme A. So we're just going to call it ACOA or acetyl-CoA. And this is basically the fuel for the Krebs cycle. And this is why we couldn't jump straight to the Krebs cycle. We have to know, where does this come from? It actually comes from anaerobic metabolism and the first stage of aerobic metabolism. All this takes place within the mitochondria itself, in particular the matrix of the mitochondria. So the deep inner workings of the mito. So the second stage is just about taking that pyruvate, turning it into acetyl coenzyme A. That is then oxidized via the citric acid cycle, or as it's otherwise known, the Krebs cycle, or as it's otherwise known, the tricarboxylic acid cycle, or TCA cycle.
Whatever you want to call it.
Exactly. It's all the same thing. Let's just call it the Krebs cycle. But the Krebs cycle, and why it's called the citric acid cycle, is it takes that vitamin C and it goes through a 2-time cycle. And in that cycle, it kicks off certain things, CO2 being one of them, more of that NADH that I'm going to talk about, a single ATP, something called FADH, goes back through it again, kicks off another ATP, some more NADH. And what we get, the outcome of this is 10 of those NADH. And I'll explain their importance in just a second. A couple of the FADH. And then in total, up to this point, we've got 4 ATP. So this entire process only yielded 4 ATP.
Wow.
And this all took place in the matrix as well. So this phase, the Krebs cycle, or the citric acid cycle, is about taking that acetyl coenzyme A and turning it into NADH.
Got it.
This, for what it's also important to recognize, this is about where fat and protein come into play. So if we metabolize fat through beta oxidation or protein through a similar process, it comes in as, and this is a vast simplification, as acetyl coenzyme A. So it enters the process right here, dumps right into the Krebs cycle. Okay, so then the NADH is then oxidized via a process called oxidative phosphorylation. And this is, you've probably heard this term. You had to have heard this term over the course of your training as an endurance athlete. For simplicity, I'll just call it OXPHOS. OXPHOS consists of 2 things: the electron transport chain, probably a term you've heard also, and chemiosmosis. Now, the electron transport chain creates basically a chemical gradient, so a chemical slope, so to speak. And then the chemiosmosis takes that energy from that gradient and uses it to create ATP. And this is where we see the huge bang for the buck. And it's also interesting to note that this is where oxygen enters the picture. So aerobic metabolism, at the very end stage here, is when the oxygen actually kicks in to pick up some of the electrons, some of the hydrogens, and make water as one of the couple of byproducts that comes off of aerobic metabolism.
Cool.
So it's not until then that we really need oxygen. Other phases are dependent on the oxygen, but this is the only phase that actually directly uses it. Okay, so now those 10 ADH, why are they so important? Because each one of those creates 3 ATP. So this is a net output of 30 ATP.
So that's where you get the most ATP.
Yeah, so up until this point, we've only garnered 4 ATP. Now we get 30 from the NADH, and we get another 4 from the FADH. So this is the most important in terms of aerobic capabilities process in the entire cell respiration process. But it's interesting to note that it started with anaerobic metabolism. We're metabolizing glucose here. We first used anaerobic metabolism. So all these people who are worried about creating or building a big anaerobic work capacity, the anaerobic work capacity still funnels into your aerobic work capacity, which is why it's so important to have an aerobic capacity if you want to repeat anaerobic efforts.
They never really operate in isolation like we like to think.
Ever. No. And what feeds the aerobic system, when it comes to glucose, what feeds it but anaerobic, the anaerobic process.
Right.
Fat and protein, that's a different case. They're entirely aerobic. But anaerobic takes place, or glucose metabolism starts anaerobically. And glucose is used very aerobically, and it yields a heck of a lot of energy once it makes it through this entire process.
Inherently tied.
So that last process, that stage 4, the oxidative phosphorylation, is just about taking that NADH, turning it into ATP. This happens on the membranes or between the membranes. So it's a very specific portion of the mitochondria. But what this shines a light on is how important the mitochondria are to aerobic performance. This is why we're always talking about different pathways that create or lead to the turning on of PGC or whatever, the master switch for mitochondrial biogenesis. This is why we're so concerned with growing our mitochondria. This is why we do aerobic work, whether it's long, slow work or high intensity work. All we want is more mitochondria. And there are other things that go along with it, lockstep, but more mitochondria, more aerobic work capacity, more energy coming out of a very small amount of input energy. So
yeah, because I mean, another line from biology class, ATP is the currency of the cell, right?
That's the other term.
It's like the other one that we heard all the time. So with ATP coming in, and obviously so much of it coming from that process.
That final process.
Once again, it makes sense why, when we're talking about increasing your density of mitochondria and the efficiency of the whole process.
But too often people see glucose and they think, oh, that's metabolized anaerobically. So if I want to do a whole bunch of anaerobic work, I really need to build my anaerobic engine so that I can process a lot of sugar. But that sugar is most of the energy, most of the ATP coming from that sugar is done aerobically. We need to have a strong aerobic system if we're going to be a good aerobic athlete.
That's a key point right there. That's like a big misunderstanding that I think a lot of people might have.
That's a head slapper.
You
have to have a good aerobic system to be a good aerobic athlete.
Yeah, exactly.
Anaerobic, But back to the anaerobic side of things, if you want to be able to repeat, and I said this earlier, anaerobic efforts again and again and again, you need to offload that pyruvate that builds up, and you do that aerobically. If it doesn't get offloaded, what happens? It ferments. It becomes lactic acid. And then we have to deal with all the complications that come with that. But the bigger aerobic system you have, the longer it takes for that pyruvate to well up to a point where it's converted to lactate, the more of the pyruvate that's going to the mitochondria and producing aerobic energy, the more work we can do aerobically.
So I guess I'm gonna take a couple steps back and ask for like the simple, clear explanations on a couple things on this.
Sure.
So basically, when we take in food and we're talking about, and you talked about protein and fat slightly, but when we talk about utilizing glycogen, this whole process,
glucose,
forgive me. When we talk about utilizing glucose, this whole process lays out the fact that utilizing glucose isn't necessarily bad, right? It's all necessary. It's all part of it.
No, it's highly productive. And honestly, and some research has surfaced, which we'll get into later, but if you want to be on a fat adapted diet, it's going to limit your work capacity. That's what we know as of right now.
Yeah.
Like I said, there is some information that's kind of messing with that a little bit. We'll see how that pans out.
Yeah. So that's like, once again, when a lot of people are like, for example, if you go and get, depending on the person probably doing the test, but when you go and get the gas exchange test, right, where they're basically testing where you start to burn more fat, where you start to burn more glucose, right?
Work intensity goes up, you're going to start to burn more glucose.
Yep. And a lot of the time it's seen as like, and I understand why, but a lot of the time it's seen really bad if you burn glucose too often, too early, that sort of a thing. And a lot of the time that's because it's tied into like certain performance markers or certain adaptations that you may or may not have. But this just shows, I think, that glucose isn't the evil thing, or utilization of it isn't the evil thing.
From an endurance athlete's perspective, glucose, carbohydrate, glycogen, hugely important.
Yep.
If you want to go fast, you got to have sugar on board.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely key. And I guess that like, how do you increase the mitochondrial density like we're talking about here? Because obviously this is the process where it breaks food down into energy. So how do you increase that? Because that's the end goal, right? To get faster.
Through training. I mean, that's basically what we do. When we elevate FTP, there is a glycolytic component to that. There is a carb burning component to that. But as you've just seen, even that is hugely aerobic. So basically everything we do is with the interest of increasing our aerobic capacity. So maybe we do it with long, slow work that taxes the muscles and uses uses different pathways to turn on that mitochondrial biogenesis. Maybe we do it with high intensity work. Maybe we do it with sprint training. There's so many different ways, but the end goal is the same across the board, more aerobic work capacity.
Yeah. And does this also tie in, I guess, talking about increasing mitochondrial density and everything else like that? You can go back, maybe 4 episodes when we talked about that really cool study that came out that was basically proving the fact that if you did a lot of training early on in your life, especially, and you kind of, you can almost bank the nuclei of these, cells.
The nuclei of the mitochondrial cells.
Yep. And then
it's a theory. It's a going theory.
Yeah. And then that you can basically get those back quicker later on, right?
Yeah. The nuclei are still there. So the reformation of the mitochondrial cells or mitochondrial bodies takes place a little more quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But really anything that nets us more mitochondria are going to net us, assuming that they're healthy mitochondria, are going to net us greater aerobic performance.
Yeah.
Dr. Coggin has a really great chart on this. And Tucker, can you Google this right now, put it in the forum? If you Google Coggin Power Zones chart benefits, there's one where it shows the different zones and then what benefit you get from each one. And it's really cool because there is this sliding scale of like what physiological changes you get. And for mitochondrial enzymes increased.
And the enzymes too.
Yep. It's
like I said, there's a lot of things that go with it. You can't just have more mitochondria.
But it's a sweet spot and threshold. Or like that's what you want. And for stuff like increased VO2 max and higher stroke volume or maximum cardiac output, that's VO2 max. Where you get some from sweet spot and threshold, but not as much for VO2 max.
But in terms of raw aerobic benefit, it runs the spectrum.
Yep.
Except for maybe neuromuscular.
And it makes sense. You're like, you look at this chart, you're like, oh yeah, I breathe really hard there, and that's where my legs burn. But it's a very interesting chart to look at.
And what happens when we increase FTP, but we're just increasing our aerobic work capacity? Really, we're capable of metabolizing more sugar, so that pyruvate doesn't well up, doesn't turn to lactate, and if it does turn to lactate, we can still utilize it because we have a ton.
That's a great way to summarize it right there.
Except for the last little stutter.
That I think it was great, Chad. But that chart, when we have it up there, that's also, we talk about this all the time, that, the specific goals of training is we're trying to stress energy systems in a particular way, and specific energy systems,
sending signals to our body,
and do it strategically. And that's why. So, and really all about this. So when you are getting faster, you are able to produce more work. It's because you either have more mitochondria, they're becoming more efficient, the whole process is better in one degree or another.
And if I can touch on that real fast too, I said the optimal outcome is that we get 38 ATP for every molecule of glucose that comes into the system. It's not how it works. I mean, it typically is more around 30, 32, and that declines. Over the course of an interval, it can decline. Over the course of a long workout, it can decline. Over the course of a race, it can decline. So your aerobic efficiency basically tanks. The healthier your mitochondria are, there are a lot of factors that will influence that, but I don't know that we ever see a full 38 ATP. If we do, it's not common.
Yeah, interesting. Well, let's go into Ahmed's question, if that's okay. So this is a common one, again, that we get in one form or another. He says, assuming adequate recovery is maintained between sessions, is it helpful or harmful to mix VO2 max into threshold workouts? And he gives us an example of that. Says at the end of an effort at maximal lactate steady state, so he's talking about roughly FTP, right?
FTP-ish.
So he's talking holding FTP for about 40 minutes. Most people should still have some high energy reserves, something that's not maxed out. They'll have that in reserve. So you should be capable of a final burst of VO2 max level for a couple minutes, maybe at around 120% until you are truly cooked. This is the question he's positing.
It's at 110.
110, forgive me, yeah. He says, would this additional burst give a worthy training impulse to any energy system, or would it be pointless? Example given, would the VO2 max systems not significantly respond to what it reads as only a couple minutes spent at full intensity, while the threshold systems would only see it as a couple more minutes at threshold?
Okay.
So it's a good question.
Yeah, and I would think of this less in terms of VO2 max work and more in terms of anaerobic work. So your aerobic system is already pretty much running full tilt, and you're asking for greater anaerobic contribution. So if you have a big anaerobic work capacity, maybe operating at 110% for a couple minutes or a minute is more realistic than someone who doesn't have a big anaerobic side of things.
Right. So if this, I guess, on the structure side of things, though, is it necessarily bad for a person to have threshold work? And
It depends
VO2?
what you're after. I mean, if you're looking to grow your muscle endurance, and this could detract from that type of workout, but if you're looking to combine efforts in a race-ready sort of format, this is a great idea, and you need to be able to do this. And this is the sort of workout that I would absolutely incorporate and have incorporated into specialization phases, specialty phases.
I've noticed that recently with the specialty phase that because I'm in the cross-country Olympic specialty phase. And I've been trying to do my workouts outside in the heat to try to get more adapted to the heat, everything else like that. I don't know if it'll be. We got something to share on that.
This is a good way of addressing your anaerobic power without having to devote an entire workout to your anaerobic power.
Exactly right.
And as the type of athletes we are, like I've said a number of times, we only need anaerobic power is always icing on the cake for endurance athletes. We don't go out and just do a single anaerobic effort and call it a day. Rather, we do tons of aerobic work and sprinkle on these anaerobic surges within races, and accordingly within workouts.
Yeah. So the underlying principle here is you still want to stick to the plan to get the adaptations that are intended on the plan that you have, as long as it's structured properly. Because if you think now, like, okay, well, for every threshold workout, I'm going to go all out and do really hard efforts after, that might compromise the quality of the workouts.
Yeah,
that
see
you're
how
able
long
to
that
do.
holds up. You're not going to be able to do that very long.
Yeah, but just on its own, it's not necessarily a bad thing.
No, I mean, it's
as long
kind
as
of
you can sustain.
base training. We take it in its integral parts, right? So we do muscle endurance work, and then we do an anaerobic workout, and then over the build phase, maybe we start to put a little bit of anaerobic work in a muscle endurance workout, and then when we get to a specialty phase, when we have to do very particular things on race day, we structure workouts that emulate those very things.
Yeah, and I've noticed this with the outside workouts that I've been doing recently, which is really sweet. Once again, there's a new feature for us at Trainer Road. You should absolutely check it out. It means you can use Trainer Road regardless of context, inside, outside, wherever you live. It's awesome. But I've been getting my work done, and then I usually have a ride home, right? Because I don't have perfect training roads right outside my front door. So as a result, when I'm riding home, it's a good opportunity if I want to be able to sprinkle in some extra. You know what I mean?
Sure.
To be able to work on that. So you have some extra time.
Late race simulation.
And yeah, outside workouts, heat. Nate, do you have something you want to jump on before that?
Yeah.
Okay.
To me, this is the 40 minutes at FTP and then the 110 VO2 max burst. I would agree with what Chad's saying is in the earlier season, so you're probably not hurting yourself, but you probably get more benefit by doing either more time at FTP, more intervals at FTP.
It's a bit too blended.
Or do more VO2 max intervals, like to focus on that system. But if I had a race that was going to end in a 40-minute climb, like this is the workout, right? Because that last 2 minutes is where you're going to break people. I would be doing this a lot. Or if I knew that any of my races had a lot of 40-minute climbs and I didn't have time to do extra VO2 max, I might sprinkle that in too. Or I'm saying, I'm going to do this workout twice a week because this is so specific to what my race is going to be. Think of maybe if we're training for Geiger time trial or something and you're around a 40-minute time.
When we get to specialization, I stop thinking so much in terms of energy systems and just think in terms of course demands.
Specificity.
So, Sophia Gomez Villafane, guest on a going to podcast.
We're going to do Cape Epic together.
Yes. This is
That's how you should say it.
Nate's Cape Epic teammate and 4-time Argentine national champion now. Super impressive.
Oh, what, she just won again?
Well, no, I mean, she won the previous year. Then she won this year. She backed up her title. So, but she mentioned this coming up to nationals for her is she basically had a workout where it was specific to the demands of the race. And she was, as she got closer into the specialty phase, she was sprinkling it in and repeating that sort of a thing. And it was a smattering, I guess you'd say, of intervals in terms of the structure.
And probably getting better and better at that workout every time she did it.
Yep, yeah, and it really helped her, when she got close to it. So,
and so if I was earlier in the season and you're doing 40 minutes FTP with this 2 minutes at 110, the next time I did it, I would raise if I was doing 300 watts, I'd be like 305 next time.
That's what she was doing. She was raising it up, and she's like, "It's getting harder."
Yeah,
yeah,
of course it is.
Well, yeah. She was just like, "Man, this is really tough,"
But that's how I would do it, rather than trying to add more VO2 max or something like that afterwards.
Yeah.
Because if you could ride at 305, you're going to go way faster than riding at 300 and then doing a 2-minute burst.
Yeah.
On the lines of heat training, we should cover this. So yesterday I wanted to do the workout on my mountain bike because I'm doing as much work as I can on the mountain bike now, getting close to mountain bike nationals. Just specificity, right? Makes sense. And I didn't have my mountain bike here. So I went home to go do the workout outside in the heat. But at the same time, I was thinking maybe I might get a better quality workout if I stayed here, did the workout inside, and then after that went in the sauna, because we just got a sauna in the office.
We did get a sauna. So it is I didn't research any of this. Someone said, Nate, I'm sure you researched everything. No, we just told our admin, get us a sauna.
Yeah.
It's a 6-person sauna. It's an infrared sauna. We think we might be able to get some bikes in. It was actually, I was a little disappointed. It was smaller than I thought it would be. I'm going to try to measure it after this. But Tucker, can you take a picture of it, put it in our the forum post, and then
we have the link to it as well.
Yeah, get from Tori the link to, it's just a Costco one for those in the U.S.
It works fantastically. I've got a smaller version of it.
Yeah,
so
it works really well.
It does work very well. It has a little TV that comes down, but it's got no HDMI input. So how are we going to use that?
I don't know.
I know, right? I think it takes DVDs or something. I don't know.
How old is this?
I do not know. A little weird, but it's very
nice.
awkward inside of a office room. Because it's way too big.
That's
for
awkward.
It.
Get 6 people in that thing.
No, we're doing
You'll
it.
experience awkward.
Today we're all doing a workout together at the same time. So I think let me get a picture of all of us in there.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm not doing that.
You're not doing that? Are you going to be in the office when we do our workout tonight?
I'm gonna be at home, but I'll be doing the workout with you.
Should drive in.
Chad will be in his own sauna. He won't drive in to get in the sauna with us. I don't think. But they're interesting. Like, so USD, once again, US dollars. Like, you can pick up like a 2-person sauna for around $1,300, $1,500.
I think mine
on
was,
Amazon.
Mine was closer to 1,000. This is just a 2-person though.
Yep. Yeah. So I mean, I'm certainly not saying that this is something cheap and we should all get, right? Like, it's an expensive thing to get.
It takes up a bit of space too.
Yep.
Even small ones.
But maybe if we can just give people a quick recap. We're not getting this sauna because we're trying to like make our skin look great and relax.
We're sweating out toxins, dude.
Oh boy.
That's a joke.
Let's throw gas on that fire.
Knock the
That's a
hornet's
joke.
nest on that one. But the goal behind this is to improve performance, right? So maybe we can give people a quick recap on how you use saunas for performance.
What's the protocol we're using, Chad?
Or what's the how do saunas improve performance in this regard?
Basically, they increase plasma volume, so your blood gets more watery and can cart around. Well, it's better at thermoregulation. Basically, that's the big get. Means the heart rate or your working heart rate will come down a little bit because blood isn't as viscous, so the heart doesn't have to work as hard to push it. But largely, that increased plasma volume leads to better thermoregulation, so you can tolerate the heat better, which means you can do more work before you cook, before your brain starts to shut things down.
Which benefits you not just in hot conditions as well. It makes you
No,
more
that actually
efficient in
carries over
cold.
because it has an impact on, once again, aerobic capacity, mitochondrial content.
University of Oregon has a study on that. Was really cool. Their power output on cyclists increased in cold and hot. Increased more in hot compared to the placebo, or not placebo, but the non-heat adapted group. And then it was still, I think it was like a 2 to 5% in the cold conditions. Which is why we have the sauna. So
what's the protocol?
What we're doing is, I think you can sit in like an hour a day or something at, I forgot the temperature, but it's really hot. We're not doing that because that's a lot of time. We are doing, Chad read another study about this where you do your workout, you get ramped up, and then you get in the sauna afterwards for 15 to 30 minutes or 15 to 20 minutes?
15 to 30.
Yep.
It's a pretty big window, but I haven't seen anything saying you need to spend more than 30 minutes. And it's a pretty miserable 30 minutes if you come in pretty much elevated in terms of core temp.
So then you get the benefits there. They take around, I believe it's 10 to 14 days to get max benefit, but they also go away like very quickly, like half that time.
You can do it every couple of days, every 3 days. You can do it every single day. You can do it every single day over a shorter period. I've seen it done for like 7 to 10 days where they do it 30 minutes daily. But it dissipates quickly. So you have to time it as close to your event as possible. And there's really no point in doing it too far outside of your event unless you're going to do it all the way up to your event.
Well, I think there's a point to it to always do it because it could
if you can devote another half hour to training every day, or every 2 or 3 days, sure, why not? Because there are benefits outside of just the bump in plasma volume.
Can I see benefits if I did this every day until Wednesday when I leave for nationals?
Yeah, I mean, even over the short term, you're not going to maximize those benefits, but you'll get some. It's just like,
Cool.
The other cool thing is, so infrared saunas, there is air temperature increase, but also it's infrared and it cooks your skin like a microwave.
Cook your tissue.
But the nice thing about it is I just did it. I've only done it once because we just got it, but I was able to have my phone in there the whole time, and my phone didn't overheat, which was only 20 minutes. But
not a moist environment.
No,
but if you go into a dry sauna though, your phone will. I've done this before at like a health club.
But they're way hotter than the
exactly.
infrareds.
The air. Well, see, the air temperature is hotter. So you're experiencing maybe the same heat as an infrared sauna, but your phone isn't.
That makes sense.
So
that makes perfect sense because sitting at 130 in an infrared is unbearable. But I can go to a dry sauna and sit at 180, and it's unbearable also. But
Yes.
my point of this is you
difference.
can actually do some work in the sauna. You can. I haven't brought in my laptop yet,
Yeah.
but I'm bringing my iPad, and I can answer emails and stuff, and make it more productive than
Just sitting there.
sitting there reading. I mean,
Just
reading
watch
a
a
book
movie.
can be
yeah, so whatever
on my
movie I was
DVD.
probably watching, because my TV's straight across from the sauna, strategically so.
Nice.
Because it's hard to just sit there and watch time.
Yes.
You'd be surprised how slow time goes, especially during your early endeavors. Because as you do these over the course of, say, 10 days,
Yeah.
day 10 and day 1, very different, very different. The first couple of days are miserable. You try not to look at the clock, and then when you finally do, it's going to drag. Minutes will drag like hours. But toward the end of it, that 30 minutes, it's you're used to it.
This is what you experience outside when you train too in summer.
Yeah.
The first hot day, you're like, oh my god. And then at the end of the,
I'm
the end of the
melting.
summer, it's not bad at all.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So Pete's question, he says, more of a comparison and personal experience question that I'm sure you can all geek out on and give some valuable feedback on. There are millions of YouTube reviews on all of this, but would like to hear from someone who uses a trainer nearly every day and knows the pros and cons inside and out. I'm currently in a position to upgrade to a top-of-the-line smart trainer and want some real-world feedback from you three on pros and cons. My question is, upgrading from a wheel-on smart trainer to a wheel-off, is it worth the extra coin? I have realized the benefit of a smart versus standard fluid trainer and want to understand the improvement of wheel on versus wheel off before I invest in the option. Again, most if not all of my training indoors, he says all of his training is done indoors, so the investment will get utilized. So he says the question is the $600 roughly variance worth it? And I think he's actually from Australia, so $600 may be relative. We're talking about Australian dollars, US dollars, but they're more expensive in many cases. So yeah, wheel on, wheel off. Your thoughts, Nate?
Okay, so I totally without thinking about money, yes, it's much, much nicer to have wheel off.
Agreed.
You usually have to buy a cassette, and hopefully you're putting that into it. But nothing slips. It's not that hard to take your wheel on and off. The annoying part of it is you could have different indexing than your wheel.
Yeah.
So you might have to re-index every time you get on and off.
Like your cassette will be shifted a couple millimeters inboard or
Just a little
outboard.
barrel adjustment.
Yeah.
Yep. But
It's
in
just
most
one extra
cases,
step.
if it's a smart controlled trainer, you might not need to be shifting very often. So, it can be
You
a
just
good
find a
deal.
gear that works and do
Yep.
it. The thing that for money wise is that you're not going to kill tires as fast.
Yes.
Especially if you have like race tires on there.
Yeah.
Those things can be
Big one for me.
$90, and you can you can easily eat through that. So
And
So
instead
a
of-
lot of people have a trainer tire or a trainer wheel. So an entire wheel dedicated to this, or you can just take that same money and fold it into a wheel off trainer.
Yeah,
I'd much
'cause-
rather have a wheel off trainer than a trainer wheel.
Because you don't want to be changing tires when you need to train. Like
No.
we talk
so
about
I used
the-
to do
You
that.
get a whole wheel.
Yeah.
So did I. With the whole CompuTrainer days, I mean, that's basically your solution.
Yeah, so when we talk about barriers to train, have your kit ready, have like your bottles ready, have like everything, have your headphones charged if they're wireless, right? Like all these little things that they really add up barriers to your training. And if you don't take care of all of them or as many as you can, it's amazing how a small little obstacle can throw your entire day off. And when we're talking about changing a tire, that's a whole different deal, especially these days because a lot of wheels are going tubeless. So then you have to deal with sealant and
It's
everything.
not realistic.
It'd be a mess. So in one regard, I look at if you're going to be training all the time and you have a wheel on trainer, you have to factor in the additional cost of a wheel. And that's not cheap. Whereas,
Or just know you're going to burn through some pretty pricey tires.
yeah, which is a pain because then you go outside and you're going to get flat tires all
Or
the time.
use crappy tires, and then you have to ride those crappy tires outside.
It's a mess. So I feel like kind of with the cost of, if you're training regularly, right, on a trainer, with the cost of your wheel off or wheel on trainer, you should consider a wheel as well as part of that cost. And then at that point, the wheel off trainer suddenly becomes more of a direct comparison, I guess, across the board.
The other thing I like is if you have disc brakes, a through axle, is I feel like you're locked in a lot more in a good way on a cassette, where when you have to like tighten down the wheel, it can be a little
You can get some
loosey-goosey.
wiggle.
And it's, I feel, some people might like that, but I don't like that, and I hate it when you feel like you're 3 millimeters off to one side,
Leaning.
and then you just get off and you try to adjust the feet, and then you never get it right.
Yeah.
When you're really locked in, though, it's awesome.
Yeah.
I use the Hammer H2, and I really like it. obviously the Kicker 2 is a great one, and then the Neo 2, like
Yeah,
three
Neo
major
2 is
brands.
great.
All of those are those three trainers you can't go wrong.
Yeah,
Yep. Drivo's good by Elite too. Their top end ones. Really, like if you look at the top end wheel off smart trainers,
pretty
they're good.
consistent experience. Yeah.
Yep, they're good. Yeah. So it's kind of across the board. And with that too, I should mention really quick, we have, and we've mentioned this before in previous weeks, but we have new Mac and PC apps that are awesome. And the whole pairing process and everything else that you go through in particular is one of the improved
Slick,
areas that is
yeah.
just so smooth.
I've been told by marketing not to call it PC, but call it Windows.
There we go. Windows and Mac.
Old people call it PC.
Yeah, whatever. So
Why
let's
are you looking at me?
Yeah. Ooh. Let's go into the last question. This one's from Todd. For this week, I should say. Then we'll get into some live questions that you've submitted. So he says, I'm a huge fan of both the podcast and the Trainer Road training programs. I'm currently midway through low volume, full distance triathlon build phase, and I'm still seeing gains. Nice. Good to hear, Todd. The only downside from the program is now I am stuck having to wait for my non-Trainer Road riding partners to catch up with me on my rides. Nice. Good
It's
job.
a good problem to have.
Like a commercial.
I know, right? Yeah. Well written, Todd. You're hired. He says, I'm using the low volume full plan to prepare for Ironman Maryland full in September and Ironman Louisville full in October. 2 weeks later. Yikes, that's close. He says, I do all my midweek higher intensity sessions on the trainer and mix in some outdoor rides for my endurance rides on the weekends. My question is around power variability index. Sometimes it's also called VI, if you've ever seen that abbreviation. I've been told that I need to keep my VI of 1.05 of normalized to average power. And that's basically, we can describe, Nate, can you describe what VI is really quick?
Yeah,
before
you
we go
just
further?
divide your normalized power. You take your normalized power and divide it by your average power,
Yep.
and that's VI. So if you had the normalized power the same as average power, it would be 1, and that's pretty much you were not you didn't go
Perfectly smooth pacing.
Yeah, you were consistent in your power.
Yep. So he says, I've been told that I need to keep my variability index of 1.05. I live in a relatively hilly area, and when riding outdoors, I find this very difficult to do, and it's typically in the 1.12 to 1.15 range. I was interested in your thoughts about how much weight to give the variability index and how to lower it if it is really important. In addition, when doing outdoor endurance rides on weekends, given the differences in these numbers, should I try to match my workout intensity, his IF, to the average normalized power, somewhere in between? So let's go into VI first. Nate, you want to jump on this one?
I'm going to skip around. Todd, bro, you need to lower that VI. You can
That is pretty high.
You can totally race the course at a 0.12 or 0.15, which is higher, but you got this thing called a marathon coming over. And if your variability index is that high, you're going over threshold a ton.
Oh, yeah.
And you're going to sap your legs. Best Bikes could tell you what the optimal pacing is, and they actually have limits in there too about how high you want to go, which helps. So I would go in there and you could put limits down. So if it's a hilly course, maybe optimal pacing is with a high VI, but not for the whole Ironman if you conclude the marathon.
Yes.
There are so many people who walk the whole marathon
Yes.
or walk 3/4 of it or even half of it. And you can save so much time by being smoother for the whole Ironman and then running the marathon, which is
Yes.
hard to do. Like,
Yep.
not many people run the whole marathon, but this could be you, Todd. And the way to do it is you change your gears. Like,
Yeah.
there's you can get a 34, 32, I believe.
Yeah.
And that on Ironman courses, I don't know the one that you're doing. I'm not familiar with how that is, but Louisville, that's like rolling hills, I think. You can totally, depending on your power to weight ratio, be smooth.
Oh, yeah.
So that's pretty much it. Just change your
'cause it
drivetrain.
says-
If you have a standard like 1125 or 1123,
Oh, yeah.
you're gonna have a huge VI.
Did you say it's a relatively hilly area? I'm not sure relative to what, but if it's extremely pitchy, it might be tough. But that 1.12, 1.15 is still very high. But I mean, really, you can accommodate some pretty steep hills. So it'd have to be pretty extreme circumstances to think that a different cog set or a different gearing selection couldn't get you lower than that 1.12.
Oh yeah. I'm looking right now at some rides like mountain biking, something like that, cyclocross.
Yeah.
It's not uncommon to see like 1.35, you know what I mean? Like a big difference. And like that might be like 200 normalized and 150 average, right? Big difference between the two.
But for an ultra distance,
Oh yeah,
triathlete,
it's
oof.
entirely different in the other. So I'm looking at right now like a ride that I did where it was basically me just trying to be stable the whole time. And the IF for that one is 1.12. Is what I had for that one. That's me trying to be stable. But when I look at time trials where I'm really focusing on that, it's really low. It's 1.02.
Gonna make
exactly.
a guess that Todd's really hammering these climbs. I mean,
Yeah.
to
It
get
has
the
to be.
VI up that high, unless
Oh,
they're
yeah.
crazy steep.
And the day that I was dealing with that was a crazy headwind, rough day. So that's going to make it, a little harder to do. But
And when I say crazy steep, by the way, I'm talking like high teens, low 20s steep.
yeah,
Yeah.
steep stuff.
So I'm about to do a race. We'll see what my VI is, but I don't have to run after this, people. I can use my some anaerobic power on some of these short things. If it's a short hill, I can do that.
You get to leave it all out there.
Exactly. So I don't, because it's all, Todd, it's all because you have to run. I understand you could probably go faster, but you didn't have to run. You could race much, much differently. Think about the run, Todd. Not no one does, but people get overzealous on the bike.
I don't know. They'll make that mistake too many times.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so that's variability index is a common one. Do we want to fit in one more and then go into the questions?
There's a lot of questions.
Yeah.
I think we have, let's
do it. Go to the live questions.
20 minutes to the
Let's do it. Okay. So once again, you can join us live on YouTube. And if you are joining us, please give the video a thumbs up. That really helps it, and it'll help more people find this video, make more people faster. Hopefully they don't race you. And then you can also comment everything else. It's awesome. Subscribe. It's all good.
Gordon asks, what are your thoughts on oversized pulleys on tri-bikes? Gordon, I don't know for, this is what I just read, but you save a watt or two, but I'd like to see what the aerodynamic differences are with the pulley out in the wind more. And is that a watt or two? So it's a wash.
Yep.
And if you can, there's a couple things though. Sometimes you can just change the pulleys inside of your derailleur cage without changing the length of the cage. Maybe that does not have an aero benefit, but there's also ones that are bigger.
Penalty.
Sometimes there are...
Aero penalty?
Yeah, aero penalty. They can be 400 watts for a watt, or $400 for a watt. That is...
Pretty pricey watt.
I know, pretty pricey watt. Even for me, although I tried to do it last year at Kona, because they were there, I was like, oh, I'll just do it. But that's my thought of the aero penalty of having a bigger derailleur cage.
Yeah. Somebody asks, hey, Chad, Jonathan, Nate, would you all be interested in doing a deep dive on track endurance racing and training? It would be cool to hear your perspectives on the very fringe topic. So there are a couple. So first of all, we always try to help people understand the fact that, we're talking about performance, human performance on a bike. And there are certain things that a track racer actually, in certain scenarios, it'll be very similar to what they would do depending on the duration if they were out on the road.
The energy systems and the conditioning is so similar across it. It really comes down to, skills. Track riders have to have a whole set of skills that road riders do not.
Yeah.
There's some very specific track skills that you're not going to develop unless you're on an oval.
Riding fixed, being able to ride at a high range of cadences, or especially a high cadence,
Yep, those things too.
Being able to, and when we rode the velodrome, when we did aerodynamic testing, we noticed the fact that when you're doing laps on laps and you're in an aero position specifically, and while a track racer will not be in the full aero position, they're still ducked down, and they're usually in a very a low front end position, relatively speaking. And it's hard because the G forces of the turns, they do wear on you. And it's kind of surprising.
Yeah. So most of the specifics to track racing would actually be getting on a track and racing. It's the conditioning is not going to be all that different. We can take any track event and say, this is really similar to this type of outdoor or this type of road riding or this type of mountain bike riding.
Yep. Yeah.
So it's interesting stuff. And I'd definitely like to talk about it more, but I'm not sure I could give you a whole lot of information that would be much different from what I'd say for any type of rider.
Yep. Shane Miller, GP Llama. If you guys aren't following him, you totally should, because he has a ton of valuable resources, especially on indoor training stuff. But he mentions that we started right when the tour ended, so it was perfect for him.
Don't spoil anything.
Yeah, no
Got
spoilers.
10K to go.
Along those lines, and I promise this is not a spoiler, this is a question that we've gotten a lot over the past week now. So Peter says, hey guys, how about a stage companion during the Tour de France or Vuelta for a change of pace? You could still answer questions, but break in and add commentary on tactics as they occur. So we've thought about this before, and if it is something that everybody wants to see, let us know. One part of me fears the repercussions, but it'd be fun to get Chad a little boozed up and have him commentate on it, but we won't do that.
Do we have a blue button?
We'd have to bring out the blue button.
Oh my God.
It'd be pretty funny.
We need a...
This
is like in person.
It'd be fun.
In person
don't
only.
bring the kids.
With no recording. Oh my goodness.
But the thought of us providing our thoughts on the racing, that sort of stuff, there are plenty of people that do a great job of it.
That's the other thing. I'm not sure we could do it much better.
Yeah.
Not that we need to do it better to do it.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of people who already do it quite well.
Yeah, Richard, Lionel, and Bernie from the Cycling
these guys are the
Podcast
best.
do a fantastic job. Lance and George Hincapie, I think, do an awesome job. It's super entertaining if you listen to the Forward or the Move, that podcast. Yeah. And then they have another one where they talk with Johan Brunel after that as well. So it's like you get a lot of insight. I feel like, sure, we could probably add some, but we are focused on making you guys faster and answering your questions. And if you do have questions specific to that, shoot them by. Maybe we can answer them, that sort of a thing. But
I fear I'd be too harshly critical.
Yeah.
Even in a sober state.
Oh, yeah. And we all are, right? When we watch the tour, we're always like, why in the world did you just do that? And meanwhile, the guy's been riding for how many days?
I'm just impressed.
Right? Yeah.
Constantly.
So Nate's an angel over here. So, yeah, anyways, interesting stuff there.
Keegan says, strong, powerful legs help a lot with the rugged trails here in Cape Town.
Ooh. That's a specific benefit that you'll be needing then, Nate.
No, 8-day stage race mountain bike, 8-day mountain bike stage race, you need to have just another pitch for strength training.
Yeah, there you go. Along those lines, somebody says, I want to prioritize the weight room in the off season, meaning that he wants to focus on strength training. What plan do you guys suggest for the off season as my next A race would be blank? So 2 things. I'm unclear on your question, Sam. If you mean what training plan you should follow while you're doing strength training, then I would recommend that you don't focus on a whole lot of, if you're really focusing on getting gains in the gym, just maintain, right? Something lower volume, lower intensity. Don't worry about that. But if you're talking about what training plan you should follow in the gym for strength training, you should work with a strength coach. We have benchmarks that are up there, but that isn't, and you can find that on forum.trainerroad.com or blog.trainerroad.com. But that's not a training plan that's laid out.
Strength training is really quite a big topic, and it does actually merit its own coach, its own strength coach, or at least exposure to somebody who has experience in the endurance realm, but also coaches strength.
Yep, absolutely.
A lot of comments about, yes, they would like to see mountain bike videos.
Cool.
2 comments about Ironman or triathlon videos. Did we mention that? Or
No. Maybe somebody just threw it in there as posited as an option.
I was thinking that maybe because they think I'm going to do the half, that I'm going to record it.
Oh.
Yeah. I wasn't planning on doing it because
that will not.
There's no tactics other than other than just a course review to see what the course is like.
I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. By the way, if anyone knows the road surface for the Santa Rosa 70.3, please put in the comments, because normally in that area it's a very bad road surface, but depending on where they ride, it could be good. That's going to impact tire choice for me for next week. So, I don't think I'm going to do it because I want to go as fast as I can.
Yeah.
And I don't think I'm really good. We're going to really not make you faster by showing a video of.
That's our litmus test for everything that we do. If it'll make people faster.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you do have questions on the course, then you can grill Nate and he'll give you all details.
The only tip I would say on this that would be on the video, but it's easy to describe, is this is I believe this race is a staggered start. Okay. And I hope we are the last start on this one for the relay, that they put the relays at the end, and they might do that, because as you come through as a cyclist, if you're not a pro, it is legal to draft up on somebody to come around. So you could potentially, and I did this in another, Ironman New Orleans, the 70.3 there. There can be such a line of people, and they're spaced out so they're not drafting, that you can weave in and out of everyone. You got to do it safe.
You're kind of always in a draft.
Almost. and you can get a gigantic benefit. And you can only do it for so long, and then there's just your no man's land.
I didn't know that was legal. So just as long as you make it a quick pass, you can ride right
Yep,
up on
it's just the amount of seconds that it takes. The pros, they can't get into the draft to pass.
that
They
I
have to
knew.
pass outside.
Can amateurs draft a pro like that? Oh, not draft, but
sweep in on them.
yeah,
I'm sure.
exactly.
Yeah.
I wonder.
I don't think I'm going to catch any pros. But
I've heard
Probably
Liz,
not likely.
Liz Lyles, I think that it was her mentioning this, that she was frustrated at times because, you know, the really fast male age groupers that are faster than many pros, they would basically show up and they just like roll right through on them, you know, and they would just be drafting kind of through because they adhered by different rules.
That's exactly it. So if everyone's spaced out, 10 meters?
Yeah.
Like when you come by people, you got to do it safe though, and you got to make sure you're not, when you sweep out, you're not taking out someone behind you trying to pass. But be very, on your left and call everything out. But that's a huge benefit for if you're the first person out of the swim and you have no one in front of you. Then if you're the last and you can draft through 500 people, I think it's about a second per person that you draft on or more. So 500 seconds. That's legit.
Yeah. Somebody says, Casey says, I'm excited/nervous to face off with Nate next weekend. Ooh. Got some competition.
Is that a relay?
So there's no co-ed relay category. So Casey, are you doing?
Must be doing something. That's relay. There we go. Got competition already.
It's either going to go really well or really bad because I haven't, ridden my TT bike at all, and I think I'm high enough now that I'm not going to be getting out. Of it. We'll see Saturday if it's good or not. By the way, I'm going to try to beat the KOM that you and Keegan stole from me as a two-person team. I'm going to do it solo and get it back, depending on wind conditions.
On Saturday?
There might be a headwind coming back in, so it might not be possible.
Saturday or Sunday of this week?
Saturday.
Wow. All right. Keegan's listening. I'm sure he might be tuning in live. He just heard that. So he's already been planning on how he's going to come back and take it once you take it. So, yeah. It's a battle. That's going to be disputed KOM.
Me versus World Cup.
That's a bold statement.
Mountain biker in the U.S.
Okay, question for your coach, Chad. Trying to create structured outside rides for enduro races. Any particular power zones or durations to focus on to prep for an enduro race? He's mentioning like 1 versus 4 minute VO2 max repeats.
We have a gravity plan.
We do.
And
it's awesome for it, actually.
Yeah. So take a look at those workouts, but it's also going to depend. I mean, enduro better than I do in this neck of the woods, especially.
So I'm looking at my power file from last year's EWS Continental race, which, it's not perhaps what everyone will have, but looking at that one, almost all of my power efforts were less than 10 seconds because it was out of a turn. It was something like that. There were a couple stages where there were outliers where I'd be pushing for 15, one of them even up to 30 seconds. But to be honest, it was much more about really short and being able to hit really hard, just, smack really hard out of every turn.
It's like completely anaerobic efforts.
Yes. Yeah, exactly right. And then your ability to repeat that, the repeatability side is really important.
Sure.
So if you're going through and you find that the repeatability side is a limiter for you, you can sprinkle in even more workouts from like the cyclocross plan.
Yeah, there's workouts
short
like
track plan.
Striped springs to mind. Can't think of any other names. Win, perhaps one of them, but they're really short efforts with pretty short recoveries, but recoveries that are long enough for you to replenish enough to hit it really hard again. But I don't think anything even goes over a minute in those. So, and they're all out efforts, and they're meant to be all out efforts.
One quick thing is a tip that I could throw out that I see guys like the top guys, like Richie Rude and those guys, when they accelerate out of a turn, you can tell they're either very focused on it or just very good at really, when they accelerate, their goal is to increase their speed. I know that sounds silly, but there are so many of us that when we accelerate, we just try to put in as much force into our bike as possible, right? But the goal is speed creation. And you can refine that. You can still put in a ton of force, but you can make it much more efficient in terms of driving you forward.
It's kind of a rate of recruitment sort of thing. So you're not looking to just push forcefully, you're looking to push forcefully quickly.
Oh yeah, it's extremely important. And along those lines, you're always battling traction, right? And you're trying to pick the lines. And you'll see that a lot of the time they don't just go as fast as they can out of a turn if it means that line of going fast will end up taking them into some rocks or something else. They might go 80% because that's going to let them just dodge that and then carry a little more momentum. I mean, it's all, once again, with enduro and anything like that, look at every foot of the course and think about how can I maximize my speed going through that. That's really the main goal of what they're trying to do the whole time. So
Hez says, just to comment on the discussion around sprint technique from 2 podcasts ago, I tried what you guys talked about, pulling the handlebars into your body. and saw the top end power up by 100 watts.
Nice job. Way
Yeah.
to go. That's awesome. So let's just do maybe one or two more, and then we'll end up leaving it for this week.
Someone says, yes, TR workouts are awesome.
That's a good one. Okay. Somebody says, what is a fat-adapted diet in 3 seconds? I like answering it like that.
Less than 50 grams of carbohydrate a day.
Nice.
That's it. Do that, and you can't help but get fat adapted.
There we go. Whether that's the right thing to do or not, that's an entirely different matter that takes longer than 3 seconds.
Well, it depends on your goals.
Exactly right.
There's 3 seconds.
Yeah.
Well, no, he asked another
you nailed it.
question.
Yeah. I said whether that's tied into the right thing to do.
It can be great for weight loss and body composition changes, and I know this.
Yeah, Chad adhered to 3 seconds very well.
People think
Follow
I'm
the
against
rules.
it for some. I'm not against it. Like
Right.
You're looking
I
for
get hated
performance
on?
enhancement. So, does it make
depends
riders
on what kind of
faster?
performance you're doing.
It does.
If you're a Ram rider,
No, you're
go
right.
fat
You're-
adapted all day
we've
long.
well exceeded 3 seconds.
We'll keep getting more questions.
So some people throwing in, this is the cool part about when you join us live on YouTube, you can see a ton of people are answering questions and chatting themselves about the questions themselves, which is really cool. In fact, somebody even says that they saw our sauna on Instagram on there. So anyways, it's cool stuff.
One more. Simon says, I heard on a conversation on a different podcast where they talked about how low 75-ish cadence is better for IM or 70.3. You always talk about 85 to 90. What are your thoughts on this? This is like, okay, I have personal thoughts on this based on seeing pros do all sorts of different stuff, is I think that it's the way you train is the way that, like, if you always train with 75, you're going to be great at that.
Yep.
There's a famous...
Look up Brett Sutton. He does a ton on...
Well, that's what I was going to say. Chrissy Wellington was Brett Sutton's athlete,
Yeah.
so that's why I think this became popular, and she rode at 80 RPMs and then running. I don't know what is better, but I do know that if you always train one way...
You're going to be efficient that way.
Exactly. I wouldn't train at 90 and then jump into an Ironman at 75.
Mm-hmm.
And there is debate on this, and maybe 75 is better. I don't think that it's like hard and fast. Like, yes, 75 RPM is the best.
Yeah, it's something to do with biomechanical efficiency, but even then, if you don't train that way, you're not going to be more biomechanically efficient. It's
Yeah. But if you have the choice to train too, I'm not sure.
Sure.
I don't know if that is the correct answer.
Yeah, and once you get into talking about biomechanical efficiency, you can't escape the fact that there's individual variance amongst people. You know
And
what I
there
mean?
are pros that ride at a higher cadence and win too.
Yeah.
Uh,
So are they wrong?
It's,
Yeah.
Exactly.
And are they going to be faster if they pedal at 70, 75 RPM?
Or they'd be faster at 100.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, so that's all annoying. What we do know, though,
It's a pretty tough conversation to get invested in.
based on Specialized, is that the speed of cadence does not affect aero, which that was a question for a while, but the wind is just moving so fast that it doesn't impact it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I know that.
Yeah. So, and there's a bit of an outlier. Like when you first start riding, for example, you may be riding at a wrong cadence. I'm saying that in quotes, right? But it's just because you haven't learned and trained yourself to pedal it, within an optimal range. You'll see a lot of people pedaling, really slow when they first start.
Yeah, it comes with time.
Yep. So thanks for joining us, everybody. Once again, if you're joining us on the podcast, we appreciate that. And you can share the podcast with everybody that rides bikes with you. That would be awesome. A huge help for us. If you are checking it out on YouTube, which you totally should, by the way, you can see that graph that Chad was talking about. You can also check it out, forum.trainerroad.com. But on YouTube, give us a thumbs up if you watch this video. That would be super helpful. And let us know what you thought. If you have any more questions, you can submit them at trainerroad.com/podcast. And if you want to check out what we do here at Trainer Road and become a faster cyclist, because that's all of our goals, you should go to trainerroad.com and check it out. Thanks, everybody. Actually, we won't talk to you next week in the normal format because I'll be gone at Nationals, and I think that we're going to do a special podcast
I'll be an
episode.
Ironman too.
And you'll be at Ironman. So stay tuned for a special podcast episode, but also be very prepared for no podcast episode because that could happen as well. So if not, we'll see you in 2 weeks. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.